Our story starts in a place you wouldn't typically expect, a hospital. We meet our protagonist, Ju Yunhai, who's trying to have a conversation with her father, which feels rigid and emotionless, leaving her wondering what and where she did wrong. She tries so much to get his attention, but whatever she says falls on deaf ears. It hurt her to realize that even in a critical state and in dire need of surgery, he doesn't even try to look her in the eyes. Seeing no point in just waiting around, she decides to take a walk. Right in the hallway, commotions can be heard between a woman and a young man. The overly dressed woman seems infuriated, which beats the somewhat calm demeanor of the man, and it takes a moment before she realizes what is going on. That man is her husband. She instantly steps into the scene, shooting daggers at the redhead lady, and with the arrogance of a peacock, the lady asks why and what she and her husband are visiting for, crossing her arms maliciously, her words coming off like venom. Yunhai immediately confronts her, one hand on her spouse and the other clutching the woman by the arm, demanding that she apologize to her husband. With a mug, the older lady snaps back and stomps off with the final words. With frustration lining her every feature, she charges toward the lady, but she quickly halts as the soft arm of her husband pulls her back. She leans close to him for comfort. Although his presence is enough for her, she can't help but feel troubled for her family. She expresses how unfruitful her visit to her father was and how empty it makes her feel inside. She pants, caressing where her evil stepmother left an imprint and asking if he still feels any pain, but he assures her that he is fine. She smiles, pleased with his response. Her visit here was supposed to be her thing, but somehow, he knew about it, too. She acknowledges that no matter how much she tries, he is too much in her skin for her to hide anything. Later at night, while cuddling with her husband in bed, poor Yunhai still can't get the whole incident off her mind. She apologizes to him, and with the same calmness, he wands it off like it's nothing, explaining that it is not her fault and that he is an orphan. After everything that happened, Yunhai still finds excuses to justify her stepmother's actions. Her husband leans in and plants a soft kiss on her cheek, making her feel great inside and lucky to have someone like him. It was unexplained. The constant reassurance from him made him even more perfect. In the heat of the moment, he holds her face and kisses her. However, he jerks back, stopping himself. He tells her he does not need to be provoked as it is one of her days, but Yunhai hushes him. In the next scene, we can see our female lead engaging in some flower decorations as her mind casts back on how much she and her husband have been trying for a child. She decides to go to the hospital the next week after she spends a great weekend with her husband at his quiet villa. The villa situated deep in the mountains was where the memories of their first night were made. Strolling into the passageway with one hand on her phone, Yunhai decides to text her husband while getting the villa clean enough for his arrival. Just then, she notices a crack in the wall. Why would a wall have a crack like that, she muses, curiosity piquing. Taking a few strides closer, she realizes it's no ordinary crack, it's an entrance. But to where? She leans into the wall panel, eyes wide and sparkling with intrigue. With a gentle push, the wall gives way, and she ventures down into what appears to be a basement. Armed with her flashlight, she pushes through door after door, until finally, she stumbles upon a switch. With a flick, it ignites a haunting red light that paints the distant corners of the room. Her mind is a whirlwind of questions as she surveys the enigmatic space. Spotting an opened laptop on a nearby table, she saunters over. There's a video queued up, ready to play. With a mix of anticipation and apprehension, she clicks the play button. The tattooed guy in the video doesn't ring any bells for her, but she's captivated and continues to watch. He appears to be in some sort of heated exchange, but with whom? His words stumble out in desperate pleas, insisting he's just the messenger, doing his boss's bidding. The visible man and his unseen counterpart volley back and forth about a guy named Kim In-cheol and the dire consequences of crossing him. The mystery man in the shadows poses a question: why is he a target? When Mr. Tattoos fails to deliver a satisfactory answer, the shadowy figure resorts to something downright chilling. He sets the tattooed man ablaze. Yunhai's heart slams against her ribs as she watches the body engulfed by the flames. The second voice comes up again, composed and gentle even in such a hideous moment. He makes a dark joke about how fast he took the life out of the other man by pouring too much oil into the fire. Yunhai rises her head up in that instant, hardly daring to breathe. She can recognize that voice anywhere. The figure materializes from the shadows, knocking the air right out of her lungs. Dojin. The man from the shadow is her husband. Presently, Yunhai and Dojin are having dinner at the villa in an awkward silence that seems overwhelming. He breaks the ice by suggesting they both travel to an island next week, to which she replies with a question about work. He clarifies that there was no need for worry as he found a doctor to cover his shift because traveling and being together for even a weekend was a priority. Her discouraging reply leaves him stunned, but it doesn't stop him from pushing conversations further. He comments on her mood and asks if it's because the meal is not up to her taste. This prompts her to speak about the basement, bringing the silence back. She pushes further, asking if he doesn't have anything to say to her. Just then, her cup slips from her hand as she pulls on her neck, gasping for air. Dojin, on the other hand, appears relaxed as he asks why she would keep pushing the question when she already knows the answer. Shock seizes her face as she coughs, thumping her chest and spitting out a thick glob of blood. Her husband still taunts her with words, questioning if she wishes he should lie about what she saw in the basement. Even on the verge of kicking the bucket, she doesn't want to believe whatever is going on. Her husband comes closer and in an attempt to comfort her, he places a hand on her cheek. Suddenly, Yunhai jolts from slumber, implying that it was just a nightmare. Her face is soaked with sweat as she slides out her tongue from between her lips, gasping for air. She sits up from bed wondering why she will have such a horrible dream, the horrid scene playing over and over again in her head. She checks her phone to get an update from her husband who still hasn't returned from work. With her heart thumping in her chest, she musters the strength to search for the person who killed the tattooed man. She reads that the case was called the Mu Am Sanbeek Kholsa serial murder case, consisting of 4 bodies. The last body, as expected, is the tattooed man in the video. Our main lead now faces the fact that if the video is real, then her husband has the ability to take the life of an actual person. However, she finds it hard to believe as he is too perfect to do such a thing. She can't misread him just from a silly video from her dream. Besides, he will tell her the truth if she is willing to ask without re-encountering the horrors of her nightmare. Even with so much confidence in him, she finds herself split between feelings of agreeing with her heart that he is not what the video shows him to be and her mind, which says the exact opposite. She picks her phone up and tries his number, which immediately goes to voicemail. Frustrated, Yunhai crouches in bed, replaying the video over and over in her head. It is a terror, but not one that will become a reality, right? Or so she thinks. Several minutes later, Yunhai notices a weird smell coming from outside. Out of curiosity, she goes to check it out, and you will not believe what she finds. The whole building is set on fire. Her first instinct is to get out of the fire, but she can't as it burns wild, rendering no place for escape. She banks on her last resort, calling for rescue. As she is about to rush inside, something wraps a hand around her face and draws her back. The pit of her stomach dissolves as she feels something cold and hard stick to her neck, and before she can break free, the figure releases her, slitting her throat in the process. She drops cat-like on her knees, struggling to breathe as the whole scene comes off as something familiar, and she can't think of anything but the man in the video. She makes an effort to speak one last time as the killer looks back at her, falling to her own darkness, the small light from her necklace glowing discreetly. In the next scene, Yunhai is seen on the ground, fully dressed up. The place, she recalls, is where her mother was laid to rest. With the way things have been going lately, she questions if this part of her life is just another silly dream. But this one, she admits, is so real that her neck doesn't hurt anymore. Like the place, her clothes and her new haircut seem too familiar, like she went back in time. Could she have been here before? She helps herself up, but before she knows what is happening, her body collides with something and she starts to fall to the ground again, but someone grabs her by the arm and catches her before she hits the floor. Everything comes into play now. She recognizes that she is not being tricked by her mind as the scene unfolds. She realizes that the person is none other than the handsome, caring and sexy Dojin, her husband. And as you can imagine, she is very shocked. Apparently, she's been transported back to the day they first met. In the previous part of our story, we get to know that our main lead is taken to the past, right on the day she first met her husband after she encountered a mysterious man who violently severed her throat in her villa. However, she still hasn't come to terms with it. Currently, she is taken aback by everything happening as Dojin helps her back to her feet. He figures she might have twisted her ankle during her earlier tumble and checks if she's injured elsewhere. When she gives him the silent treatment, he gently scoops her up, cradling her in his arms. Without a word, she clings onto him. At the bus stop, he plunks her down on a bench, explaining that they'll hang out there for a bit while he bandages her up because the hospital is miles away. Yunhai finally pipes up, assuring him she's not in pain anymore. Dojin, ever the practical one, encourages her to stand. But she resists, still feeling the sting of her fall. She insists on heading to the hospital and thanks him for his help, carefully avoiding his gaze. Dojin plops down next to her, insisting they wait for a cab, leaving Yunhai speechless once more. She sits there, deep in thought, wondering about the man she's been in love with. She finds herself asking him about Moon Jong, but he denies knowing him, prompting her to describe him in detail. Despite her efforts, she can't seem to jog his memory. The nightmare of the video and the name Kim In-cheol, someone her husband seems to have a beef with, makes her question everything she thought she knew about him. Yunhai is so lost in everything that she doesn't notice the hand creeping up on her. With her eyes wide, Ai turns to the side and asks if something is wrong. Dojin stutters, telling her that there is a spider at her back he's trying to catch. She looks behind her, hardly daring to breathe and then screaming for him to get it off of her. Crying out "Appa," she flings herself at him, clinging on for dear life as she inquires if the eight-legged intruder is gone. A bit baffled, he reassures her and helps her straighten up. An awkward silence descends, broken only when their gazes meet, holding each other's attention. With a sudden shyness, she pivots away, her face hidden as she apologizes for her boldness. Dojin's head dips forward, his body shaking with mirth. Is he seriously laughing at her? Yunhai shoots him a frowning glance and demands he stop, to which he sheepishly apologizes, adding that she looks adorable. For a brief, intense moment, she gazes at him, the desire to trust him resonating deep within her. In the next scene, Yunhai trudges back home from the hospital, her right leg encased in plaster. Her home stirs up painful memories of her sick father. She also realizes it's her mother's Memorial Day and the anniversary of her first meeting with Dojin, 9 years ago. She finds herself yearning, then overanalyzing about the man who ignited the fire and waited to finish her off, without a second thought. Her thoughts rewind to the day of the incident, the day her husband hadn't come home yet. Could it be? She can't reconcile the idea that her husband would be the one to harm her. She knows he could never do such a thing. Yet, she misses him and worse still, wants to trust him. As she contemplates her next move, she recalls the video of the man in the basement, Moon Jong, and why her husband felt compelled to end him. A lightbulb moment strikes her. If she can uncover the reason, perhaps she can prevent it from happening again. She arrives at a resolution: she will not let Dojin be that man. Later, we see Dojin standing by a gravestone, conversing with the departed about how her daughter always breaks into tears at the sight of him. He remembers a time years ago when he had to tell a distraught little girl that her mother won't be returning, causing her to cry inconsolably. The girl is none other than our protagonist, Yunhai. He observes her, realizing that crossing paths with someone like him has always spelled trouble. Back at the medical center, Dr. Dojin is engaged in a chat with a lady who appears a bit timid. She blushes fiercely as she musters the courage to speak her mind. She confesses that she knows he's not one for romance, but takes the plunge and asks him out anyway, promising a world of benefits. Meanwhile, Yunhai is secretively observing this exchange from behind a bush, filled with regret. She watches as another woman makes a play for the man she's due to marry. From her covert surveillance at the hospital, she realizes that his professional persona is worlds apart from the man she's familiar with. The lady apologizes to Dr. Dojin, who shows kindness by reassuring her that he'll put the incident behind him. Returning home, Yunhai is irked by what she's uncovered on her reconnaissance mission. Why would a woman weep over a rejection? And why was Dojin so considerate towards her? She shakes off these thoughts and refocuses on the case details pinned up on her board. She predicts that Moon Jong's disappearance will occur in 6 days, with Park Min as the second victim. With only 5 days left, she needs to devise a plan to prevent these events from happening. She's now fully convinced that she has to trust him. She knows she has to act. Over on a bustling street, Dojin is seen chatting with a man while they're out running errands. He teases the younger man, asking if he was invited because he couldn't bear to visit the orphanage alone. The man retorts, saying it's simply because he lives nearby. They make their way to a store, shop, pay, and agree to have their purchases wrapped. Suddenly, the brown-haired man spots an odd figure outside. His eyes follow the stranger as he approaches a pair of women, grabs the bag nearest to him, and makes a hasty escape. Dojin's friend runs after him, grabbing him by the shoulder. He asks the man to put the bag down, promising not to involve the police if he does. However, the thief doesn't listen. He pulls out a penknife and drives it straight to his victim, impaling him in the arm. The brown-haired man falls to the ground in pain as the thief dashes off, just in time for Dojin to capture the scene. In another scene, Yunhai is seen walking down the same road Dojin passed. She knows he is to meet up with his friend Co1, and then she waits, wondering if she's too early. With speed, the masked man keeps on running until he collides with Yunhai. She immediately apologizes, asking if he is okay as she kneels to help him with the bag. With the shock of recognizing that the purse is not his, she grabs it by the rear and pulls hard. The struggle goes on for a while, before he knocks her off, making a run for it. However, Dojin charges towards him, instantly throwing him off balance and pinning him to the ground. He delivers hard blows to the thief's face, subduing him. Just then, Yunhai sees the knife and drives for it, clutching it tight in her hands. This gives the masked man room to kick Dojin off, grab her, level her up to her feet and push the knife into her skin. He threatens to end her if Dojin doesn't stay clear, promising that he is not mincing words. Scared, Yunhai stares at Dojin for help, but in return, he smirks, his eyes fierce as he gives the thief the go-ahead. From fear to shock, her eyes widen like saucer plates as she sees him sell her off like she means nothing to him. Yunhai starts to question her understanding of Dojin, pondering why he would make such a comment. Dojin keeps his composure, his voice steady as he reveals the grim reality to the masked man, assuring him that he'll eventually be caught, and potentially for more than just theft. He continues to goad the man, suggesting he assesses the situation to avoid further complications. The thief retorts angrily, pushing Yunhai aside and making a run for it, giving Dojin the chance to catch her. He pulls her close, whispering an apology before releasing her and pursuing the thief. Despite knowing Dojin's capabilities, Yunhai can't help but worry about his fate. She calls out to him repeatedly, pleading with him not to go, but he ignores her pleas. So, she does the unexpected, she shouts his name. This stops him dead in his tracks as he swings around to look at her. His face marked with curiosity, he wonders how she knew his name. Later that day, Dojin, Yunhai, and Co1 huddle around a police officer, discussing the incident. The officer assures them he will contact them once the suspect is apprehended. He also gathers more information from them, realizing the case goes beyond mere theft. As he departs, Dojin and his friend engage in a minor dispute about the robber. His friend expresses disappointment over Dojin's failure to apprehend the thief. Dojin dismisses it, encouraging him to visit the hospital. Yunhai, however, finds their conversation slightly unsettling, as she doesn't want anyone assuming she's in cahoots with a thief. She mentally rehearses her explanation for stopping Dojin from chasing the masked man and how she knows his name. She vacillates between telling him she has future-seeing powers, claiming his name was written all over his face, or simply confessing that she fell for him at first sight and conducted some covert research. Regardless of her chosen explanation, she decides it's better to seem a tad eccentric than come off as a stalker. With a wave of his hand, Dojin snaps her back to reality, startling her in the process. She urges him to continue the conversation, which he does, confirming that she should be terrified of what happened. She tells him that what happened isn't his fault since he did it on purpose. He goes on to reflect his suspicions of her since the first day they met, with her knowing his name, telling him not to chase after the thief and asking him weird questions. He asks her if she has known him before, to which she answers positively, saying she sees him in her dreams. Better to sound crazy, right? She trusts doing this will bring her close to him, so she continues in her lie, telling him that in her dream, she saw him get finished off by the masked man and that's why she had to stop him. However, Dojin appears not to believe her as he stares right into her eyes, asking if he appeared in her dream before they even met, to which she nods. He continues to investigate, asking her if she follows him in case he gets finished off like in her dream. Again, she looks up to him and nods sheepishly. Wait. How did he find that out? Beads of sweat break out on her face as he exposes her movement to the health station, revealing that the cast on her leg and her weird outfit sold her off to him. Although Dojin keeps his calm, Yunhai, on the other hand, flushes with embarrassment as she fears what will become of the situation. He demands for her phone, which leaves her stunned as she questions his reason for wanting it, which he gives an explanation to. He lets her know that she can't follow him forever and he believes in her dream, but only for a limited period. With her phone now in his hand, he inquires more about her dreams, trying to know if she has ever tried to stop them from occurring. She answers yes, watching him type his number into her phone, dialing it straight away and then slipping the phone back to her as he encourages her to call him whenever she feels worried. It feels like a contract because, with a soft smile, he promises to call her every day just to let her know that he is still alive. Stunned, Yunhai nervously clutches her phone as a worried Dojin offers to escort her home. She politely turns down his offer, assuring him she'll catch a cab instead. Then, in a surprising twist, she hands him an umbrella, promising him it'll rain soon. Let's rewind to the same day and time from Yunhai's past. We see her nestled in a cafe while a torrential downpour takes place outside. She's waiting for Dojin, who is nowhere to be found. She mentally resigns herself to walking slowly and braving the rain instead of risking a run with her compromised ankle. As she heads out, using her hands as makeshift shields from the rain, she stumbles into Dojin. He swiftly grabs her arm and pulls her close. He quickly apologizes for making her wait, to which she casually dismisses, reassuring him it's all right. She leans in, reaches for his wet hair, and affectionately pats it dry, expressing concern for his well-being. In that moment, he's overcome by emotion and softly calls out to her, subtly inviting her to move closer to him. Fast forward to the present. Yunhai hands Dojin an umbrella, assuring him that it'll rain later that night. This seems entirely unbelievable to him since the weather forecast doesn't predict any rain, yet it indeed starts to pour. He extends his hand out, this time more intrigued by her prophetic dreams than skeptical, but he still fires off questions asking if she foresaw the rain in her dream. She remains silent. Meanwhile, we empathize with her internal struggle as she tries to make sense of everything, questioning if experiencing her past again is a final gift from the divine. And just like before, she knows Dojin will get drenched, but this time she doesn't wait for his invitation. Instead, she takes the initiative and pulls him closer herself, taking control. At her home, we find Yunhai rummaging through an open box. She retrieves a calendar and flashes a wide grin, overjoyed at having met Dojin. Even though he might have changed, she's confident that there's still a spark of goodness in him. Her little daydream is interrupted by the sudden buzz of her phone. Answering it, she discovers it's Dojin on the line. He gets straight to business, telling her he needs her assistance in locating someone and promises to fill her in the next day, abruptly ending the call. Sitting in his car, Dojin can't shake off memories of Yunhai, especially her prophetic dream of his brutal end. The mere thought brings a smirk to his face, knowing that reality will likely be quite the opposite. As the night gives way to morning, we find Yunhai at the health station district, seemingly waiting for someone. Her slouched posture suggests she's been there for a while. Deep in slumber, she doesn't notice a figure looming over her. Gradually, she lifts her groggy head, her breath hitching as she finds Dojin gazing down at her. Though she manages to stammer out a question about his work, he counters with his own question, asking if her stalking is her way of protecting him. He suggests she should call him instead of tracking him down at his workplace. Despite his words, Yunhai insists that she trusts him, but seeing him in person brings her more comfort. He dismisses her concerns as mere dreams, but she refutes that, admitting that her dreams about him bring her so much joy that she forgets to wake up. Dojin bursts her bubble, questioning if the same dream where he meets his end is what makes her happy. By this point, Yunhai is exasperated with herself. She attempts to compose herself and explain that he holds a special place in her heart, and she wouldn't forgive herself if anything happened to him and she failed to prevent it. Dojin looks at her, puzzled, as she expresses her gratitude for his trust and for letting her stay close to protect him. Even though it all clicks for him, he voices his regret over her overprotective ways. Yunhai didn't want him to regret her constant presence. All she wanted was to grow closer to him. But how? She has a plan, and she hopes it'll work. Ignoring his comments, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out a can of drink. She struggles to open it, pulling harder on the tab until the drink explodes over her face and into her eyes, causing her to shriek in pain. In the next scene, we find Yunhai stealthily celebrating a small victory in an unfamiliar bathroom. Her back pressed against the door, she tries to contain her excitement. Her plan worked. Suddenly, a knock on the door brings her back to reality. It's Dojin, offering her some dry clothes he left outside the door. He also mentions how uncomfortable her wet clothes would be for her journey home. Going home? She plans to spend the night. Oblivious to her intentions, Dojin continues making suggestions from the other room, including using a dryer from the drawer if her clothes aren't dry enough yet. With this unexpected turn of events, her mind races, and her heart pounds in her chest. She hurriedly tosses her clothes into the sink and calls out to Dojin, letting him know she's washed them. Unfazed, Dojin leaves the folded clothes at the door and heads off to find another set as promised. Just then, Yunhai, half-dressed, dashes out from the bathroom. She peeks out and timidly asks if she could stay the night since she missed the last bus. Taken aback by her state of undress, Dojin averts his gaze, speaking over his shoulder, giving her the okay. Elated, she thinks her plan is working. However, her bubble soon bursts when he mumbles about sleeping elsewhere, given the number of hostels in the vicinity. Undeterred, she follows him around, trying to guilt-trip him into staying the night with her. However, he doesn't bite, suggesting he could sleep on the couch or, better yet, the floor. She catches up with him, offering to stay just for half the night if it suits him. But he refuses, backing away and crossing his arms over his chest in discomfort. Forgetting about her bad ankle, Yunhai keeps getting closer with each plea, while Dojin tries his best to avoid her partial nudity, urging her to get dressed. Suddenly, she trips over, sending them both tumbling onto the sofa with her landing on top of him. A flustered Dojin pleads for some space. As if that's not enough, she pulls herself up, looks him in the eye, and insists that he let her share his bed. Yunhai continues to plead her case while still atop Dojin until he finally surrenders, humorously waving an imaginary white flag. He requests that she get dressed as she casually divvies up sleeping arrangements. As she sits up straight, her towel slips a little. Dojin is about to protest but quickly covers his face, assuring her there's nothing to see. He gently insists that she get off him, which she does, offering an apology before dashing off and leaving a flustered Dojin in her wake. Fast forward to the next scene, Yunhai is sprawled out on her bed, a pillow muffling her giggles as she replays their awkward encounter. As she mentally notes to get a closer look at him later, her phone buzzes with a notification. It's an update on the case she's been tracking. The subject, a 27-year-old man named Park Min-hyuk who's gone missing today. That's why she wanted to keep Dojin home. She realizes it might not be enough, but it's the best she can muster without knowing Dojin's connection to the tattooed man and why the second victim disappeared. The more she thinks about it, the less she knows about the case itself. Why were 4 bodies buried at Muayam Mountain? Who's the culprit? She hopes for a movie-style epiphany, but she's at a loss. All she really knows is that 4 bodies were unearthed on a mountain 7 years ago, and 2 years after that, she was attacked at her villa. As you can imagine, our protagonist is lost in thought, deeply mulling over the case. She recalls the difficulty in finding evidence or witnesses in the past. But now that she's back in time, she realizes she might have a fighting chance. Or does she? The following morning, Yunhai sets out with a determined stride. She's got intel that Park Min lives near her school, but involving the police will be tricky without a solid reason. She can't exactly ask them to investigate based on her dreams. That absurd story is reserved for Dojin. So immersed in her thoughts, she doesn't notice a man approaching until he reaches from behind her and snatches a pair of chopsticks from her side, startling her. Snapping back into reality, she looks up to the man and apologizes, and as she catches his face, she feels chills run down her spine as she realizes that the stranger in the store is none other than Park Min. What is he doing here? Why is he alive? To her surprise, Yunhai does what she knows how to do best. She follows him out of the store, into the rainy streets and down a lonely valley. She stops in her tracks to confirm that what she is seeing is real because according to her research before her assassination, he was supposed to go missing yesterday, except there is a mix-up in the case. The past alters because of her, or worse, because she persuades Dojin to stay home. She tries to call him but rethinks her decision because she trusts he has nothing to do with Park Min, nor does he have a hand in her assassination. Just then, a figure emerges from behind and whacks her in the head with a rod and watches as she falls helplessly to the ground. Later, we see our main lead lying in a familiar room as she struggles to keep her eyes open and immediately jolts out of bed to examine herself. She whines in pain as she touches her neck wondering if all that happened was a dream until it suddenly dawns on her that she is in Dojin's house. She gets out of bed and walks to the living room only to find a sleeping Dojin on the sofa, but he doesn't look well at all. She crouches beside him and places the back of her palm on his forehead. Although it is a harmless gesture, his eyes shoot open and within seconds, he snatches her by the arm and throws her down, going straight for her neck and squeezing hard. Yunhai chokes up some words as she begs for air. She sees the bandage tied around his right hand and remembers that it is the same hand her attacker sustained an injury from her. It's just a coincidence, right? But the intensity of Dojin's eyes makes her believe that it's probably not. Chapter 8. Yunhai struggles with kicks, but nothing seems to work, making her so out of breath that she feels her body shutting down. Just then, Dojin gets a hold of himself and pulls away, bursting into a shower of apology which Yunhai halts, telling him to stay away from her. She asks how she is now in his house, and he gives a detailed reply of being called by a stranger after she finds her lying in the rain by contacting the number she sees on her phone screen. He even goes as far as to show the conversion between him and the stranger and then states that bringing her back to his place was his idea because she wasn't injured. At this point, Yunhai cares about one thing, the bandage on his hand. She questions him about it, he tells her to forget about it, hiding the injured hand behind his back like a toddler, but she doesn't listen. She grabs his hand forward to check it out and finds that it is bleeding. Dojin agrees to show it to her, peeling the bandage off slowly, explaining that he cut himself. Fortunately, she notices that the wound doesn't reach the back of his hand, meaning he is not the attacker, and she also discovers that he has never had an injury like that in the future, and she apologizes for the discomfort. Dojin trails a finger down the sore skin of her neck, apologizing for scaring her and telling her that he is always a little sensitive whenever he is feeling unwell. Yunhai pays no mind as she seeks permission to rest on him for a bit, taking all of him in. She believes that she is the reason he now has nightmares, and he is hurt because her presence in the past makes a shift in the future. In another scene, a heavy door is seen cracked open with blood overflowing and pouring down the stairs, while a child is seen walking towards the door. Big, terrified eyes stare back into the door as a voice calls for the child to go away and hide. The face belongs to none other than young Dojin. The mysterious nightmare continues with a man laughing crazily as he calls random words out while holding a screaming Yunhai hostage with a knife to her neck. And just like the villa, a building is on fire again while a young Dojin crouches in the corner, fearing for his life. Moving to the present, Dojin struggles so hard to fall asleep as Yunhai nurses him, telling him that everything will be fine. Back into Dojin's peculiar dream, he finds himself sitting in an odd, unfamiliar place. Suddenly, a plush toy approaches him, asking why he's all alone. Just then, Yunhai materializes behind him, encouraging him to join her and play. Suddenly, Dojin is jolted awake from his unsettling dream. As he blinks his eyes open, he notices his hand, the one with the injury, intertwined with Yunhai's. This leaves him slightly perplexed. He sits up and gazes at her, admiration in his eyes as the morning sun bathes her face in a soft glow. In a tender gesture, he raises a hand to shield her eyes from the bright light. Shift to the next scene, where we see a man with his back turned to us. He's holding a picture of Yunhai. His hand bears scars identical to those she inflicted on her assailant the night she encountered Park Min. The scene segues into a flashback to that fateful night. We see Dojin assisting Yunhai while a friend looks on, noticing his hand. The friend asks if he's injured, but he dismisses the concern, claiming he's fine. When questioned about the attacker, Dojin avoids the topic, instead grabbing his phone and telling his friend he'll need his help to act as a witness. He doesn't want Yunhai wrapped up in everything that's going on. The attacker, lurking nearby, eavesdrops on their conversation before slipping away. Once safe, the attacker pulls out a pouch belonging to Yunhai. Inside, he finds a coupon card from a place called Mountain Cafe. It's a reward for playing a game well, offering free drinks. A smirk spreads across his face as he holds up the card. The next day, Yunhai goes out of her way to find answers by hiring a detective. She knocks on the window of a car to get the attention of the driver, asking him if it is possible they meet in person for their transactions. The shabby-looking man in the driver's seat doesn't look impressed but agrees and tells her about the man he is paid to follow, asking her to join him in his car so they can talk, which she declines, giving an excuse of attending classes. The man sighs, pulls out a large envelope and tells her that she can count on his information since he comes from an entrusted background. Yunhai agrees, but he cuts her off, letting her know he isn't helping her because of the money involved, so he needs to know her purpose for the investigation. Surprised, she tells him that he is in no position to know, but he presses on to speak about how there is no reason for a student to put in so much money to find a person. Yunhai assures him that the money is not a problem as she has a lot, but that doesn't stop the man from blabbing about how bad the world is and how she should be careful. This only angers her because she feels like he is saying all these to avoid doing the work for her, but it's quite the opposite. He clips his card to the envelope and hands it to her, giving her the last advice of reading it carefully before he drives off. Back in school, Yunhai apologizes to a girl about being behind schedule with her assignments and promises to cover up for it. They continue to catch up on things, which leads to a chat about a boy, her friend advising her to get him off her mind, but she reconsiders giving another chance to him and tells her just that. Later that day, Yunhai decides to take a walk home from school on a quiet road. She is deep in her thoughts as usual, but this time she recalls how fun school is, and how she always tries her best so her father doesn't hate her. She takes note of a man following her from behind her shoulders at the same time, answering a call from Dojin. On the other line, he asks where she is and if they can meet up, which she replies to, giving a specific location. He promises to meet her up in a few minutes, because he is nearby from a visit to his friend's house who lives close to her school. She agrees to wait, asking about his friend's hand and then his wounded hand, to which he shrugs off like it's nothing. As Yunhai continues to express her concerns, she peeps behind to find the same man following her with a wicked smile on his face. Scared, she calls out to Dojin, who tells her to meet him up at the park. But will she be fast enough? Caught in the grip of fear, Yunhai confesses to Dojin that she's being stalked and makes a dash for safety. In her haste, she forgets about her injured ankle, stumbles, and falls. But Dojin is quick on his feet, sweeping in to catch her. Concerned, he asks about her ankle. She brushes it off, admitting she's just a little shaken up by the whole ordeal. Once back on her feet, she clings to him, scanning the surroundings for the mysterious stalker, but he's nowhere in sight. With Dojin as her escort, Yunhai makes it home safely. As they step inside, she lets him know she lives alone and is planning to move soon, even though she's only recently settled in. She shares how her fears were ignited during a coffee catch-up with friends when she mentioned her new rental, the Tianu apartment. It turns out there's a chilling rumor about a girl who lived alone there and mysteriously disappeared. Yunhai pours out her apprehensions to Dojin, who steps up, offering her a can of self-defense spray. He even cracks a joke about it warding off humans, not ghosts. Handing over the spray, she wonders if this was his reason for visiting her. But Dojin has another surprise up his sleeve. He pulls out a gorgeous necklace and dangles it before her. Her eyes light up at the sight of it. She must have left it behind during laundry at his place. She's overjoyed and thanks him profusely. Without him, she'd have lost it forever. But to Dojin, it's no big deal. He suggests she go inside and rest. Just as he's about to leave, Yunhai stops him with a request. Could he delay his departure a bit? With it being her first night in the apartment and the recent stalker scare, she's a bit nervous about being alone. Dojin agrees, but can't resist asking if she isn't scared of him or if she doesn't see him as a man. This is the first time he's willingly come this close to her, even touched her. It sends a rush of feelings through her. Is he hinting that she should be afraid of him? If so, maybe she should. But of course, she can't be scared of him. How can he be dangerous? A man who makes sure to ask for permission before holding her hand. Just then, Dojin tells her that he doesn't know which category she falls in, too careless or too trusting. Yunhai is quick to clarify that her trust is reserved for him alone. She reminds him that had he harbored ill intentions he could have acted on them when they first met, given he was the one who helped change her clothes after her attack. But Dojin modestly deflects the praise, telling her it was another woman who assisted that night. Does Yunhai know her? She responds with a request that he extend her warm thanks to this mystery woman for preventing her from catching a cold. Suddenly, Yunhai turns the tables, grabbing Dojin to prove that she isn't the only one who should be fearful, she can hold her own too. His eyes widen as her hands touch his face, making him acutely aware of the fine line he's treading. Even though she initiates a more intimate moment, he manages to maintain control. Yunhai doesn't push, but pleads with him to stay the night, which he agrees to. The question, however, remains, how long can they resist each other? Fast forward a few beats, and we find them in the kitchen, mulling over their dinner options. As Dojin looks on, Yunhai unpacks a box, arranging items neatly. They decide to enjoy some drinks, having already eaten. He offers to help, but she declines, explaining she only takes out what she needs, and keeps the rest safe in case the missing person returns. Dojin, however, doesn't heed her words and makes a move to grab the box. Yunhai stops him just in time, saving him from injuring his hand. She nudges him towards the shower, relieved he didn't stumble upon the victim's files she had stashed away. Emerging from the shower a few moments later, Dojin finds Yunhai in the living room. He's clad in a snug-fitting t-shirt that draws attention to his physique. Once again, they find themselves in a playful debate over sleeping arrangements, each willing to sacrifice their comfort for the other. But Yunhai finally wins, insisting he take the bed. She even suggests they share it. Dojin, however, outrightly refuses. Her feelings are slightly bruised by his rejection, and she questions why he's so inflexible. It appears our leading lady might need more than just one night after all. As the night deepens, Yunhai casts a shy glance toward Dojin, who's on the opposite side of the room. She calls out to him, asking if he's asleep. Met with silence, she retreats back to her sofa and drifts off to sleep. Awake, Dojin stares at the ceiling, lost in thought. Turning his gaze, he spots a photo of Yunhai and her mother, triggering a flood of memories. The scene shifts to a dark, desolate night, where two wrecked cars teeter on the edge of a bridge. A stranger ambles past the grim sight, while a young, Bloodied Dojin is seen helping a frantic woman who pleads for him to save her daughter, a young Yunhai. Back in the present, Dojin lifts Yunhai from the sofa, carefully tucking her into bed. He takes a moment to appreciate her serene beauty before his mind rewinds to the events that led him here. He remembers arranging to meet her at the park. As they chat over the phone, he spots her and the stalker crossing paths. He immediately gives chase, but the man slips away, leaving behind Yunhai's card. Dojin now finds himself wrestling with distraction as he fiddles with the card, regretting his missed opportunity to apprehend the stalker. His train of thought is interrupted by a buzzing phone. He checks the notification to find a message about a glitch in setting up a trap, urging him to call back. One last look at the sleeping Yunhai, and he grabs his jacket, ready to leave. But he halts when he spots a brown envelope carelessly stuffed in a cabinet, a card stapled onto it. He retrieves it and studies it closely, anger coursing through him. He recalls all the playful banter they've shared since their first encounter. Would she go to any length to protect him, or has it all been a lie? The following day, Yunhai awakens, stretching as she shakes off the remnants of sleep. At first, her mind is a haze, but as she realizes she's in bed instead of the sofa, she bolts upright, wondering if she's taken to sleepwalking. To her surprise, Dojin is still there in her apartment. He teases her about how peacefully she sleeps, before steering the conversation towards pressing matters like the envelope he found. He begins by asking if she followed Park Min to his house on the day she was attacked. She counters with her own question, wondering how he knows Park Min. He brandishes the envelope, repeating his question. The tension in the room thickens, but she admits that she's investigating Park Min because he appears in her dreams. With a calm demeanor, Dojin asks if she does the same for him. She denies it, and he proceeds to pepper her with questions about his past. He gives her the chance to explain what she plans to do once she finds all the people from her dreams and what she hopes to gain by keeping him safe. But she can't admit she's trying to prevent him from becoming a murderer, so she lies again. That's the last straw for Dojin. His usual pleasant demeanor shifts dramatically as he demands to know what she knows about him and why he's so significant to her. He warns her that if she's secretly investigating him and the others from her dreams, she better not mess it up, or she'll be outed before any of them. Yunhai is taken aback by his words, fear creeping into her gaze. Did he really mean what she thought she heard? In the following scene, we see a mysterious man, later revealed to be the scruffy detective Yunhai met at school, standing at a doorway, his eyes fixed intently on a camera. He studies it for a moment, before reaching out and yanking it off. Their plan appears to have backfired as they watch the detective on their laptop screen. Seo-1 is disheartened that the police discovered the cameras they'd hidden at Park Min's house. But Dojin clarifies that the man isn't a cop anymore, and he knows this because he's familiar with him. He asks Seo-1 if they were successful in apprehending Yunhai's stalker. When Seo-1 says no, Dojin can't help but smirk. The scruffy detective will aid them in locating Park Min. His new plan seems promising, at least for now. In the next scene, we see a young man sprinting through a door, shouting for his boss and announcing that there's a visitor waiting. Receiving no response, he strides over and thumps his boss on the back. His boss groggily wakes up, grumbling about needing more sleep to function properly. But at the mention of the name Park Min, he springs to life in a second. The detective, who we now learn is named Choi Tae, tiredly peels off his sleep mask and gets ready for business. In a few minutes, he's dressed up and in a conversation with his guest who hands him a bag with a proposition that he helps him find the owner of the bag as he mistook it for his. The owner of the exchanged bag is Park Min. The man at the other side of the table is none other than Dojin, but not the regular one, Dojin in disguise. He speaks about finding it hard to get help from the police as the task is too small, but Choi Tae assures him that it is no big deal. He pays the detective up front and promises to make another payment once their guy is found in a week. Choi sees the money as too much and tells him exactly that, but he's interpreted by his apprentice who advises him to take the job as it is, which he agrees to, promising to do his best. Dojin gets up to take his leave but stops himself to ask the detective a personal question. Why did he quit his job as a police officer? In the past, after the car accident happened, Dojin was taken to the police station as the only survivor and witness to the scene. There was a lot of buzz about how he made it to the mountain from his house, and if he saw the face of the criminal. Just then, a young man pushes himself past the guards to get to Dojin, but when they don't let him in, he rages about the boy being a family member of a burnt victim to get his way and introduces himself as Officer Choi Tae, which is unbelievable. Choi makes his way to him and urges him to say everything that happened, and Dojin doesn't hesitate to describe the criminal to him as a man with a neck tattoo, short, red hair, a cracked voice, and a scar on his right eye. He moves closer to the officer and whispers that if anything, he should help him find the criminal, and when he does, he should end him, permanently. Dojin then asks the detective why he stopped working as an officer, and Choi simply tells him that he was too tired so he left the job. As he makes his way out of the office, the detective watches him carefully. He knows he has seen him somewhere before, but where? Choi Tae crushes the butt of a cigarette in an ashtray and falls back on the sofa, asking his apprentice if there is any success in locating Park Min, which he says there isn't, at least, not yet since he is going through the memory card of Park's camera. They have a little chit-chat about their private agency and how to level up and fix some patches until Ace finds something on his computer. There are photos of a helpless girl hanging from the ceiling with blood gushing out of her mouth, hard evidence of sexual assault. Choi gets into detective mode, demanding all missing persons records from 2 years back in the same location Park Min stays. They have to find the girl. Back in school, Yunhai is in class with her friend, but she can't stop looking at her phone from time to time as she tries not to worry about Dojin's whereabouts, seeing that he hasn't replied to any of her messages. Even though he cared enough to leave some medications for her at her door, she still feels he's avoiding her because she overplayed her role by acting like she knows too much and even paying a detective to investigate for her. Poor Yunhai can't think straight anymore because of how different he was last night with raising his voice at her, because he has always been gentle with her even when she does the stupidest things. She desperately wants to hear from him, and mostly, she craves to see the other side of him. After classes, Yunhai gets on the phone with the detective to discuss Park Min's case, but is hit with a piece of new information that he has gone missing without a trace. Choi tells her about the CCTV footage he found of a man seen close to the missing girl's house, which is also close to Park Min's house. He explains that the photo of Kwon Min Jong, the missing girl, was taken in Park Min's camera the same day as the CCTV footage of the man with the suitcase was captured, banking on the fact that it can't be a mere coincidence. Again, Choi asks Yunhai her reason for spying on Park, but she refuses to answer as they already went over it before, but he pushes it this time since it has become too big of a deal, but she is still not shaken by his question. He tries to persuade her to speak about her intentions of spying on Park and what she knows about him so he can help her with the case, because as a former officer, he knows something that she doesn't. If she pokes her nose around and finds about what Park does to women, she will be implicated as well. From what Yunhai knows, Park Min just might be our killer. When she thinks of it, the future changed wildly since she was attacked in front of his house, and with everything going on about Dojin's new injury, the stalker, the self-defense spray given to her, and all the warnings about Park, it is clear to see why she feels that way. But is that enough reason for Dojin to hurt the tattooed man? Because those men did the same things to others? And did he even do it? Taken back to the past for more context, we observe the stalker rolling his box into an unknown building as he keys in the password and gets into the apartment. He smirks before entering and slowly walking up to a lady who is peacefully sleeping in her bed. With the intent of keeping her alive, he presses a white cloth to her face, suffocating her instantly. Presently, Park Min is sitting on the same bed with a smile on his face as he plots his devious plan yet again. Laughing, he looks at the portrait at the side of the bed, knocks it over and steps hard on it while making rude comments, but he immediately halts as the door squeaks open, revealing Yunhai's frame. With a trip down memory lane, yet again we are introduced to Dojin as he rambles in an apartment. He seems a little tense as he ignores a call from Yunhai, places his phone on a table next to a tray of bandages soaked in blood, and goes about his business. He looks over his shoulders, and right there in his bed is the missing girl, Min Jong, covered with bruises. In our next scene, we see that Seo-won later finds the identity of the thief. Back at the hospital, he hands Dojin a white bag and tells him that the criminal from weeks back wasn't in for the money as he had other motives, like getting information from the female student he stole from. Dojin examines the bag as his friend keeps dishing out detailed evidence about their guy, explaining that the thief has been following Yunhai to her house and workplace whenever he keeps an eye on him and that he burnt the bag he stole at a construction site. The whole story makes it evident that the stalker of Yunhai is also the pickpocket from weeks ago. Seo-won tells his friend that he also followed the stalker to his house, which raises concern and brings out his professional side. He advises his friend not to push too hard on the investigation as his body is not fit enough and the man they are dealing with is dangerous. With a sigh, Seo-won expresses his frustration and promises to go easy next time. Even with the seriousness of the case, Dojin knows that it is no use involving the police as everything could get messed up in the end. However, he counts himself lucky. At night, back at the apartment, Min Jong is still lying in bed calm as ever. We get to know that Min Jong is being nursed by Dojin's auntie, a sweet lady who doesn't mind taking care of a total stranger. She asks about Yunhai, who she had also taken care of a few days back, wanting to know if she has the police on the case yet, but Dojin tells her that Yunhai doesn't want them involved and uses the opportunity to send her warm regards. With that, he thanks her and takes his leave. On his way home, Dojin receives a call from Seo-won, who is currently watching Yunhai at her apartment. He tells his friend that she is safe in her house, but he is also suspicious about the light that doesn't seem to come off. Dojin promises to meet him in an hour, but Seo-won objects, his words laced with worry as he tells him to take a night off from watching over Yunhai. Well, talk about the devil. Dojin excuses himself to receive a message from Yunhai, but is immediately shocked by what pops up, a photo of her cramped in a box with a cryptic message below it to give the sender back their toy. Back at the secret hideout, Yunhai is scared to death because she doesn't recollect how she ended up here, but she knows exactly what happened before that. She remembers that after work, she goes back to her apartment still keen on finding out more information about Park Min but is immediately attacked by him. Without a minute to collect herself, he tackles her to the ground and threatens her with a knife to her face, promising to end her if she makes a fuss. Currently, she knows who Park Min is, but what she doesn't know is why he kidnapped her and how he knew her house. She looks around the unfamiliar room and tries to maintain her cool while finding a way to escape. However, she is immediately thrown back by her weak ankle. As chills run down her spine, she faces the fear of being unable to escape and instantly remembers the self-defense spray, but there is just one problem: she has to untie her hand to use it. And like the situation couldn't get any worse, Park Min kicks in with a dramatic entrance, taking the last bit of Yunhai's stability. Park Min leisurely walks and bends over to an uneasy Yunhai who is still struggling to break free from the tapes tying her hands together. He makes a light joke about her not being able to run off since her ankle is already broken, but he also assures her that everything will be okay only if she obeys him. For the first time and slowly, she speaks, asking him his reason for hurting her, but this only triggers him. He violently takes her by the hair and launches her to the wall, telling her that she is the reason everything goes south, making him spill the blood of more than 2 people and turning him into a total monster. Yunhai offers to compensate for her troubles, however, the offer is immediately thrown off as Park admits that he isn't doing any of it for the money. He lets her in on everything he knows about the investigations she and Dojin have going on and vows not to take it easy on them. He bashes her to the ground, giving her an opening to spot a weapon on the floor, but before she can grab it, he produces her phone and begins to click away. Yunhai stares at him with wide eyes as he holds it up to her face like some kind of poster, showing her a ghastly photo of Min Jong, who is now her ransom. An incoming call from Dojin interrupts their little session, and when Park answers, he teases him for saving Min Jong because now, he has to turn her over to him again. Dojin on the other line doesn't bulge and does what he has to do to keep Yunhai safe. Realizing the extent Dojin is willing to go for Yunhai's freedom, Park Min switches plans. He first confesses to breaking Yunhai's ankle, but he promises not to hurt her again only if Dojin does as he tells him, which is to get to his house, take Min Jong with him and kill her himself. Late into the night, on a deserted street, CO1 keeps vigil outside Yunhai's apartment, his car stationed inconspicuously by the roadside. Dojin joins him later, briefing him on the situation and cautioning him against entering the apartment until he's contacted. CO1 sighs heavily, his disappointment palpable over his inability to safeguard Yunhai. However, Dojin presents him with another mission to protect Min Jong in case anything happens to him. With a silent prayer that Yunhai has the self-defense spray he gifted her before her abduction, cleverly equipped with a tracking device, Dojin jumps into his car. His relief is palpable when he quickly pinpoints her location. With a singular focus, to shield her at any cost, he floors the gas pedal. Guided by the tracker, Dojin soon locates the hideout. His entrance is met with a chilling sight: Park Min menacingly wielding a knife against Yunhai's throat. Park Min confronts Dojin, demanding to know how he found them. Instead of answering, Dojin commands him to drop the weapon. Enraged, Park Min digs the knife deeper into Yunhai's skin, eliciting a scream of pain from her. She pleads with Dojin to stay back, and he acquiesces, promising not to advance if Park Min ceases harming her. This only seems to infuriate Park Min further. Despite her terror, Yunhai manages to grab a sharp object and begins sawing through her bindings, oblivious to the blood seeping from her hands. Running low on patience, Dojin interrogates Park Min about his intentions. The answer is cryptic: revenge. But for what? As Park continues to speak, he reveals that Yunhai's involvement complicates matters. To make matters worse, he tosses a knife to Dojin, instructing him to stab himself in both legs if he wishes to see Yunhai walk away unscathed. Yunhai interjects, bargaining for her phone and promising to pay any ransom he demands. Park Min, however, is adamant, convinced she'd escape with Dojin at the first opportunity, leaving him for the authorities. He's confident he's smarter than they give him credit for. His gaze returns to Dojin, gesturing for him to proceed. A shocked Yunhai watches on, questioning his intentions, but Dojin dismisses her pleas. With a deep breath, he lifts the knife high above his head and does the unimaginable: he plunges it into his own thigh. Yunhai's heart wrenches as she witnesses Dojin's painful sacrifice, tears welling in her eyes. Park, on the contrary, is visibly thrilled, his laughter echoing ominously around the room. He admits, with a hint of surprise, that he hadn't expected Dojin to go through with it. Yunhai finds herself repulsed by his words. Does he consider human life a mere plaything? She can't help but ponder if she's the reason Dojin is enduring all this pain. A flurry of questions about the past whirls in her mind, particularly the night she was attacked and whether Dojin's injury was a result of his attempt to shield her. Her return to the past, she realizes, has only complicated matters further. Park Min, however, seems far from finished. He expresses satisfaction with the turn of events and assures them that he'll keep his word and free Yunhai. As Dojin extracts the knife from his thigh, he issues a stern warning to Park: if he reneges on his promise, Dojin will hunt him down, no matter where he hides. Park merely chuckles at the threat, urging Dojin to wrap things up and assuring him that he'll uphold his end of the deal. Meanwhile, Yunhai is close to freeing herself from her binds. The blood seeping from her hands weakens the adhesive of the tape, bringing her one step closer to escape. Simultaneously, Dojin is formulating his own plan. Despite the debilitating pain in his legs, he's determined to seize an opportunity to attack Park when he least expects it. As Yunhai finally wriggles free, she snatches the knife from Park and propels herself forward, landing hard on the ground. Twisting around, she manages to kick Park off balance, though the effort sends a jolt of pain through her injured ankle. This momentary distraction gives Park the chance to reclaim his weapon, but Dojin lunges forward, snatching the knife before Park can grasp it. With the tables turned, Dojin taunts Park, asking him how it feels to be on the receiving end. Without waiting for a response, he thrusts the knife deep into Park's chest. Park gasps as blood splutters from his mouth, his curses filling the room. But Dojin isn't done yet. He drags Park to the ground like a ragdoll, using a nearby metal gate as an improvised weapon to inflict further damage. Paralyzed by fear, Yunhai can only watch in horror as Dojin ruthlessly dismantles his opponent. The sight of Dojin, relentless and unforgiving, is a stark contrast to the man she knows. As soon as the rage leaves his body, Dojin turns and heads towards Yunhai, shrugging off his jacket and putting it on her. She asks why he hurt Park Min the way he did and why he hurt himself too, but Dojin pulls her in and holds her tight in his arms, whispering apologies to her. He remembers the day he escaped from the burning house when he was little and found a woman lying helplessly in the bushes. She asked for one thing alone, for him to save her little girl, Yunhai, and since then, he couldn't get the name out of his head. He figured the only way he could protect her was by staying away from her yet, watching her closely and wishing her nothing but the best in life. But he failed. On that very day, she slipped and twisted her ankle. He had failed by helping her, and she made matters worse by trusting him way too soon because now, he has nothing but guilt in his heart for not protecting her enough. Shaking, Dojin trails a hand down Yunhai's face and holds her gaze, his heart thumping painfully in his chest. Unable to contain his emotions yet again, he pulls her into a warm embrace and holds still, rendering Yunhai speechless. Nevertheless, she hugs him even tighter and says everything will be all right before pulling away and telling him that she will protect him. Then, out of tiredness, she immediately falls asleep right there in his arms. Dojin places a soft kiss on her cheek as tears roll down his eyes. In our next scene, Yunhai gets out of bed and realizes that she is in a hospital. She notices a figure sitting by the side and inquires its identity. As the man in the suit begins to speak, expressing his annoyance at her leaving the house without his consent, she immediately confirms who he is. He asks about her new lifestyle, claiming that if she wants to move out after her discharge, he can make room for that. What? Where is his sympathy? Yunhai can't believe her ears. She looks at him and asks if he isn't a little worried seeing that she is wounded, but she stops herself before she gets too emotional, because there isn't any use talking to someone who doesn't care. Proving her point, he huffs and tells her that she isn't a kid anymore so she should stop acting like one. Yunhai speaks to her father again, telling him about the changes that occurred since her mother's death and the fears of him being so rigid even before he dies. She also lets him know that there is no use in them pretending to be related anymore, and with that, her father gets up to leave. Without looking her in the eyes, he mutters a few words about not wanting to show up as her guardian anymore and walks out on her. But before he can reach the door, she calls out to him while trying so hard to prevent tears from choking her. She advises him on his bad smoking habit and with that, he walks away, leaving her a crying mess. The next day, Detective Choi Tae meets up with another detective to discuss the recent case of Park Min. The officer asks his partner how he knew about the culprit's hideout and Choi explains that he has been in Park Min for quite a while so it is obvious that he does. The officer tells Choi that they have been on to Park Min but they don't know his identity. He explains that Park Min is known for his good abduction skills and from the videos he has seen, he is not a first-timer. With a cigarette between his lips, Choi flips a brown envelope in the other man's face, telling him that the evidence in it is enough to convict Park Min of all the nasty things he has done while threatening to advertise on his site that while he is able to catch criminals, the police themselves are being useless. Before leaving, Choi tells the police officer that the first body has been found and the authorities should find the other with the information given in the brown envelope. A few weeks back, while the investigations about Park Min were still heated, Dojin kept in touch with Detective Choi Tae just in case. They spoke about a lot of things, and Dojin asked if he found out the owner of the bag he brought to him in his office, and if he could identify the victim in the photos. Choi expresses his surprise and asks Dojin how he knew about the whole case, but he keeps on talking, telling the detective that Park Min showed the victim's videos of how he ended another woman who looked exactly like her. Dojin goes out of his way to find the identities of the women and seeks help from the detective to help him find the bodies, but Choi Tae is suspicious and asks how he knows so much, but Dojin doesn't spill, letting him know that he doesn't need to explain anything to him, only entrusting him with information that he can't give to the police. Presently, Dojin and Choi Tae meet up in the hospital, still speaking about the case. The detective asks him how he knows where the body is, and Dojin explains that Park Min usually goes for victims who have no surveillance camera around them, no family or live far away from their loved ones, so it becomes hard, if not impossible, to find them when they go missing. And because of how competent Park became with leaving evidence lying around in his house, Dojin installs a camera to watch him and collect more information, that is until Choi Tae removes it. Dojin gets up to take his leave, applauding the detective for his hard work and telling him that he gave him some money for the stress. A few minutes later, he finds himself by Yunhai's room door considering going in. He knows he shouldn't be close to her, but he can't help craving some time with her, even if it is for a little while. He sighs and walks to his room, thinking of their past and wondering why he helped her when she slipped and broke her ankle. Suddenly, Yunhai dashes out of her room and runs right into his arms, asking where he has been without hiding her worry. Surprised, Dojin asks about her ankle, but is instantly thrown off with a question about his thigh. But before he can answer, she pulls him into his room, tosses him on the bed and fires more questions at him. She inquires about the safety of the girl and what she is supposed to say if the police get involved. Dojin assures her that the girl is safe and that there is no need for her to worry about the police, before telling her to sit and rest her ankle. Yunhai does as she is told, though she is still bothered about his body language towards her and is afraid that he will run away, but she doesn't tell him that. She, however, lets him know he has to be careful and not associate himself with a criminal like Park Min, and how unimpressed she is with the fact that he got hurt because of her. Dojin doesn't seem to take the cue, as he tells her that his injuries are nothing compared to hers, and he would do the same for anyone who requires help, making her feel less special. Yunhai, wrestling with her inner turmoil, clings to the fabric of her dress for some semblance of steadiness as her self-restraint crumbles away. She finds herself drawn to Dojin, planting a kiss on his lips, seeking answers to the questions swirling in her mind. She's desperate to understand why he had kissed her back at Park Min's hideout when she was supposedly out cold. More than anything, she yearns to hear him echo her feelings. Dojin, however, insists that she wasn't unconscious, attempting to deflect her queries. But Yunhai isn't deterred. She teases him, saying that if he's just a run-of-the-mill creep, he can admit it. She's pulling out all the stops to coax those 3 magical words from him. She recounts their shared moments, those sweet, intimate instances that are etched in her memory. But Dojin remains steadfast in his denial, painting her memories as mere figments of her imagination, making her feel like she's losing her grip on reality. Yunhai's patience has been wearing thin, dealing with Dojin's stiff demeanor over the past few weeks. She's at her wit's end, unable to keep her emotions bottled up any longer. Spotting a rare moment of privacy, she seizes the chance to lay her feelings bare. All the while, Dojin just stands there, too shocked to utter a word. When he finally finds his voice, he pleads with her to stop the tease. But Yunhai is far from done. Ignoring his plea, she takes his hand and places a kiss on it before moving up. Their kiss lingers for a moment before Dojin gently lifts her to the bed. For the first time, the man hovering above Yunhai seems ready to bare his soul. She braces herself, eager to hear his confession. But instead of sweet words, they are greeted by the sound of the room door swinging open. The surprise intrusion leaves them both wishing for the earth to open up and swallow them whole. CO1 bursts into the hospital room, immediately going on the defensive when he catches sight of the scene unfolding. His mother quickly shushes him, reminding him of their location, but even she can't hide her shock as she takes in the spectacle. Dojin, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, leaps from the bed and pleads with Yunhai to exit. When she attempts to protest, he insists, his tone firm yet calm. Recognizing his warning, Yunhai leaves, feeling dismissed. Alone in her room, she ponders how much longer and how many more rejections she must endure before she can truly call him hers. She recalls the 5 previous rejections, which didn't deter her, and realizes that alcohol only complicates matters. Eager to shift her focus, she decides to channel her energy back into the case and contacts Detective Choi Tae. With her phone in hand, she's ready to get back on track. As the day trickles into night, we're introduced to an entirely different vibe and character. A woman with fiery red hair and a voluptuous figure lounges in a dining room, savoring her red wine. Her tranquil moment is interrupted by her son, fresh from school, who queries about his sister's belongings scattered outside her room. Before he can complete his sentence, his mother interjects, ushering him off to his room. We learn that the boy is Juharam, Yunhai's stepbrother, and the lady is Yunhai's stepmother. After dispatching her son, she turns her attention to her husband, who's rising to leave the table. She commands him to finish his meal. Meeting his expressionless gaze, she asks if his food has joined the list of things under her control. Agreeing, she quips that his good looks are his only worthwhile contribution. He retakes his seat, picking at his meal as his wife watches in silent fury. She stalks over to him, outlining the cause of his concerns as if he's incapable of figuring it out himself. She assures him that there's no need to worry about Yunhai, but advises him not to make his concern too apparent or pay her too much attention. Leveraging her greatest weapon, she leads him seductively to their bedroom, ensuring he has a night to remember. Inside the sterile walls of Seiyun Hospital, CO1, still nursing his injuries, decides to spice up his buddy's day by ribbing him about his recent romantic escapade. Dojin tries to shoo him off, but this only fuels CO1's playful torment. He expresses his joy at seeing his friend finally loosen up a bit and show some vulnerability instead of his usual judgmental demeanor. With a sigh of resignation, Dojin mounts a weak defense, but CO1 is on a roll, speculating about what may have transpired on the night he rescued Yunhai from that pickpocket. At his wit's end, Dojin threatens to spill the beans about his friend's injuries to his mother if he doesn't zip it. This segues into a discussion about CO1's habit of referring to Dojin as his brother, despite knowing that Dojin is an orphan. CO1 doesn't see an issue with it and tells him as much. But Dojin remains firm, asking for some alone time before CO1 exits. However, CO1 can't resist doling out a final piece of advice. He warns Dojin that if he doesn't seize the moment with Yunhai, he might live to regret it. Then, with a knowing look, he reminds him that his inability to love might stem from the lack of parental affection in his past. With that, he leaves Dojin alone with his swirling thoughts. CO1 sneaks back into the room, catching Dojin off guard. He delivers another gem of advice, advising Dojin to always use protection, accompanied by a cheeky grin. Before he can launch into another round of wisecracks, Dojin silences him with a well-aimed pillow. The hospital room quickly transforms into a battleground as they engage in a playful pillow fight. Amidst their childlike banter, Yunhai quietly slips into the room and observes their antics. Caught off guard, they freeze, then sheepishly acknowledge her presence. CO1 makes a theatrical exit, leaving Dojin to navigate the awkward aftermath. Clutching a pillow for support, he tries to gauge how much she overheard, but she plays coy. He quickly apologizes for his friend's unruly behavior, but Yunhai casually brings up her prophecy, hinting that she knows about his orphan status. Yunhai assures him she doesn't know everything about him, but she's determined to protect him because he's a good person. She admits to knowing about his past and that CO1 and his mom are crucial to him, but she wants to know them in reality, not just through her dreams. Despite sounding a bit desperate, she expresses her desire to get to know Dojin better. He warns her that he might be more trouble than she bargains for, but she doesn't mind. She vows to stay out of trouble if it means he won't keep pushing her away. As Yunhai leans into him, resting her head on his shoulder, she boldly states that if he didn't harbor feelings for her, he wouldn't have reciprocated her kiss earlier or initiated one at the hideout. Despite Dojin's attempts to deny his emotions, it seems Yunhai is resolute in winning him over. Dojin tries to brush it off as an innocent peck on the cheek. But Yunhai isn't buying any of it this time. She playfully demands a real kiss. Their moment of intimacy is cut short as Yunhai's eyes drift towards the pile of shopping bags resting on the sofa. She turns to Dojin, asking if they're hers. Dojin scoops up the bags and hands them over, giving her a quick rundown of what she should wear during her hospital stay and what she could use once she's discharged. He even offers to help her carry the bags, asking if they're too heavy. Yunhai can't help but smile at his thoughtful gesture. It's these little things that make him so endearing to her. However, Dojin quickly reminds her that he's just being nice, not trying to woo her. Later, back in her room, Yunhai takes a moment to tend to her favorite necklace. She gently lifts it out of its cleaning solution, pats it dry, and inspects it. Her eyes catch a faint hint of red within the pendant. She shrugs it off, deciding it's not important, and continues with her routine. The scene then shifts back in time. It's the night of the fire. We see paramedics frantically trying to revive Yunhai's mother, but their efforts prove futile. As Dojin watches in horror, the camera pans to reveal the same necklace that Yunhai was cleaning earlier. It lies loosely around her mother's neck, a silent witness to the tragedy that unfolded. The next day, Dojin finds himself playing a game of hide-and-seek with the pint-sized stalker who's been trailing him around the hospital. Whether it's mealtime or early morning checkups, she's there, right on his tail, even following him to Park Min's room. She's become a constant, albeit adorable, thorn in his side. Despite her incessant presence, he can't help but replay their shared kiss from yesterday in his mind. The memory sends a rush of heat to his cheeks, and he quickly hides his blushing face behind his hands. While Dojin is lost in thoughts of Yunhai, a sleek luxury car pulls up to the hospital curb. A man of apparent wealth steps out, conversing briefly with his escorts before heading towards the hospital director. The director formally greets him, and they engage in a tense conversation about the hospital accommodating both a kidnapper and his victim under the same roof. Mr. Lee, Yunhai's father, criticizes the hospital for its lack of sensitivity towards the victim's feelings. The director reassures him that the criminal is separated from the main hospital wing and is under police watch. But Mr. Lee isn't satisfied. He instructs the director to arrange for the criminal's transfer to another facility by tomorrow. From his hiding spot, Dojin recognizes Mr. Lee instantly and deduces from their conversation that the criminal in question is none other than Park Min. As he watches Mr. Lee stride away, Yunhai emerges, her gaze fixed on the ground. She walks past her father without acknowledging him, behaving like they're total strangers. The encounter leaves Dojin stunned, but he keeps his thoughts to himself. Yunhai spots Dojin and chides him for his constant roaming around the hospital. Dojin starts to retort, pointing out her similar habits, but she quickly silences him. He suggests they head indoors before she catches a cold, but she insists on staying outside a bit longer. The two settle into a deep conversation about Yunhai's father. Dojin expresses his gratitude for the special room arranged by Mr. Lee. He wishes he could do more to show his appreciation, but Yunhai cuts him off, stating that her father doesn't need any extra attention. After a moment of hesitation, Dojin asks about Yunhai's relationship with her parents. She responds with a rueful smile, explaining how they've always neglected her. She recalls their first anniversary dinner at a fancy restaurant, a night that should have been joyful but ended in humiliation. Her stepmother publicly berated her husband, even splashing red wine on his suit. When Yunhai tried to intervene, her stepmother defended her actions as a lesson. To add insult to injury, when she confronted her father about the incident, he simply threw a property deed worth $8 million at her, asking her to sign it and leave his life forever. Yunhai lets out a sigh, her gaze distant. She opens up to Dojin about the strain in her relationship with her father since her mother's passing and his subsequent marriage to her stepmother, who happens to be the hospital owner's daughter. Yunhai admits that they've grown distant, treating each other more like strangers than family. But she's made peace with it. She confides in Dojin, revealing these personal details, because they're on this journey of getting to know each other better. All she asks is for him to keep this information between them. As Yunhai pours her heart out, Dojin can't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. Despite everything she's been through, she still manages to wear a brave smile. They continue their conversation, discussing the idea of being more intimate with each other. However, Dojin, ever the stern one, quickly dismisses the notion, advising Yunhai against it. Meanwhile, in the director's office, Mr. Lee watches the pair from a distance. Their friendly bickering brings a small smile to his face, but his gaze lingers on Dojin. He recognizes him as the person who saved Yunhai from the kidnapper, but there's something else about Dojin that has him intrigued. His face bears an uncanny resemblance to a certain young boy from years ago. Who is Dojin, really? This question lingers in Mr. Lee's mind as he continues to observe the pair. Later in the day, Yunhai gets a surprise visit from her friends at the hospital. They're there to lift her spirits and ensure she's being well taken care of. As soon as they settle in, the questions start flying. Yunhai calmly fields each one, spinning a tale about a mountain fall to explain her injuries. Why was she on the mountain, you ask? No reason, really. Suddenly, one of her friends changes the subject. She wants to know if any of them would be interested in going on a blind date with a handsome guy from her club. Apparently, he's been hassling her for a meetup ever since she posted a group selfie. When questioned why she doesn't go herself, she confesses that he's not her type. Her dream guy is someone intelligent, peaceful, and caring. Sounds a lot like Dojin, doesn't it? Anyway, back to the blind date talk. The friend, Ja Jiang, shows a picture of the guy, and everyone gushes over his fit physique. But when Yunhai sees the photo, she's hit with a pang of concern. This guy is the same one who dated her friend So Young, cheated on her, and then married the woman he got pregnant. Yeah, he's that kind of jerk. Yunhai knows she has to stop this date from happening, even if it might be tough to convince her friends. She decides to take one for the team and volunteers to go on the date herself. Dojin, who's been sneakily listening in on their conversation, almost chokes on his tea. He can't believe what he just heard. Well, serves him right. Later that night, Yunhai watches as authorities escort Park Min out of the hospital. Despite everything, she can't help but feel a sense of worry. She turns to Detective Choi Tae, seated beside her, and asks what happens next. She knows Park Min could potentially be pardoned after 20 years, even with a life sentence, but that's about it. She also brings up the hypothetical idea of time travel as a means to prevent someone from becoming a monster like Park Min. Choi Tae, always the realist, explains that people who turn out like Park Min often have a history of physical or psychological abuse, making redemption a challenging prospect. Park Min's life was far from easy. He grew up with an alcoholic father, and his mother was his only source of support. But everything changed when he found her lifeless body hanging from the ceiling. Detective Choi Tae starts off by acknowledging the rough life Park Min had to endure, but he's quick to point out that blaming such behavior on their environment isn't fair to those who strive to rise above their circumstances and become better. He goes on to explain the prison system to Yunhai. If inmates don't show signs of reformation, they're often faced with a death sentence. Yunhai accuses him of being cold-hearted, attributing his harsh perspective to his history in the police force. But Choi Tae simply shrugs and tells her it's just how things work. He even goes as far as saying that if any of the victims were his kin, he'd have zero qualms about pulling the plug on Park Min himself. It's a necessary evil to keep society safe, he reasons. Yunhai is taken aback by Choi Tae's candidness, but she's not done yet. She asks if an arrest would still be possible without the bodies of Park Min's victims. Choi Tae indulges her curiosity for a bit, answering her questions patiently. But soon, he flips the script and asks why she's so intrigued by time travel and whether she's afraid that the person she wants him to investigate might end up like Park Min. Yunhai quickly dismisses his concern, urging him to carry on with the investigation. If the person turns out to be as bad as Park Min, she suggests that Choi Tae should just give him a good thrashing and let him live, offering to compensate him for his efforts. Choi Tae looks at her, dumbfounded, before questioning her belief that money can solve everything. He reassures her that he'll handle the job professionally. As Yunhai leaves the police station, her mind is a whirlwind of thoughts. She can't shake off the eerie connection between Mountain Muam's second victim and Park Min. She's exhausted but knows she can't stop until she brings all the criminals to justice, especially to save Dojin from a similar fate. The thought of moving him to a mental facility crosses her mind, but she quickly dismisses it, knowing it'd land her behind bars too. So deep in thought, she barely notices Dojin standing in the doorway, now fully dressed. He asks her where she's been, and she jumps, surprised. She tells him half-truths about her visit to watch Park Min's arrest. Seeing his outfit, she realizes he's been discharged from the hospital. A pang of sadness hits her, she's going to miss having him next door. Though the thought of not living together anymore saddens her, she's grateful for his farewell. Dojin offers to pick her up when she's discharged, which instantly lifts her spirits. She quickly packs her bags and changes, ready to leave with him. After settling the hospital bills, they walk out together. Yunhai grins, teasing Dojin about them looking like a couple as they leave the hospital grounds. When Yunhai steps back into her apartment, she's pleasantly surprised by the sight of new security cameras lining the hallway. Dojin, on the other hand, reacts with a simple shrug. It was his idea to beef up the security measures, after all, including upgrading the keycards. He also suggests that Yunhai should consider installing a lock on her door, just for added safety. She nods in agreement, promising to take his advice to heart. As they wrap up their little home security tour, Yunhai wonders aloud how Dojin plans to get back to his place, given his injured leg. She offers to call him a cab, but he politely declines. Apparently, a friend is picking him up. As he gingerly moves around, she can't help but feel a stab of guilt. She apologizes for her inability to protect him or adequately express her gratitude for everything he's done for her. Dojin brushes off her apology with a light laugh. He assures her that he's not as fragile as she thinks, and he's always just a phone call away if she ever feels scared. Before she can dwell on his words too much, he adds that she's free to call him even when she's not scared. Before leaving, Dojin leaves Yunhai with some advice on how to care for her injured leg. Once downstairs, he takes one last look at the apartment building, ensuring everything seems in order. As he gets into his friend's car, he can't help but reflect on Yunhai's bravery. She might not realize it, but her investigative work linking him to Park Min saved him. Sure, she dreamt about it, but her research played a significant role too. But that was just a lucky break from her primary investigation into the Mountain Mu AM case. That's where the real danger lies, and Yunhai's work has given him a list of names like Moon Jong and Kim Incheol. A true hero. Dojin finds himself mulling over Yunhai's research notes, particularly the part that pinpoints him as Park Min's killer. He can't argue with her conclusion, it's exactly what he believes Park Min deserves. The day Park Min was supposed to meet his end coincided with the night Yunhai stayed over at Dojin's place. He grapples with the reality that in order to protect the woman he loves, he has to resist his urges to become a criminal. However, he can't back down from his mission of revenge. After all, Yunhai's mother is the reason he's still breathing. He knows Yunhai will likely try to stop him, but he's determined not to let her interfere, even if it means causing her pain. His thirst for vengeance is unwavering. It's game on. In the following scene, we're taken back to Dojin's childhood days yet again. We see young Dojin, looking disheveled and forlorn, in a room that's in dire need of a serious cleanup. His solitude is interrupted by a knock on the door and a woman's voice telling him to get ready to go out. A red-haired lady tosses some dresses at him, instructing him to wear them after taking a bath. She then realizes her mistake and decides to take him for a haircut instead. At the barber shop, Dojin gulps down the juice offered to him as if he hasn't had a proper meal in days. After his haircut, he gratefully accepts some snacks from kind-hearted women before the red-haired lady ushers him out. On their way home, Dojin observes a warm interaction between a mother and son at a clothing store. He yearns for that kind of affection instead of the harsh treatment he gets from his own mother. He recalls how even during Christmas, when every other child in the neighborhood received new shoes as presents, he was left with hand-me-downs from his older sister. His friends suggest that he should lie about losing his shoes to get a new pair, but Dojin shies away from the idea, fearing his mother's wrath. His friends label his mother as scary, which brings back memories of the day he called her mother just to ask for some food, only to be threatened. Yes, she truly is terrifying. In the dead of night, a mysterious figure is sprinted down the street, his face twisted in fear as he desperately tries to outrun the man hot on his heels. His efforts are in vain, though, as a strong hand grabs the back of his jacket, jerking him to a sudden stop. "Dojin," he gasps, struggling to catch his breath as Dojin's grip tightens around his throat. Dojin demands to know how it was that both his father and maid were caught up in the fire that fateful night, yet this man managed to escape unscathed. The man splutters, unable to speak, so Dojin releases his grip, letting him crumple to the ground. Without missing a beat, Dojin continues his grilling about the fire. The man denies being at the scene, claiming he had arrived earlier that day for a quick errand and left before the tragedy struck. But Dojin isn't buying it. Why else would he flee if he didn't have something to hide? He insists on hearing the full account, every last detail. The man stammers out an excuse about not remembering much since it all happened 16 years ago. But Dojin remembers enough. He recalls being in the room where men spoke ill of his father, saying he deserved what happened to him. He was too young then to put names to faces, but now he needs the man before him to jog his memory. Dojin has pieced together a theory. His father had a squabble with someone who later orchestrated his death, making it look like a burglary gone wrong. But with his father's high-ranking position, pinning down potential enemies isn't easy, grudges were common. Still, Dojin is determined to uncover the truth. The man pleads ignorance, claiming he was merely an errand boy, but Dojin isn't having any of it. He proposes turning the man into an ally, extracting crucial information from him within a week. And he makes it clear, if the man values his life, he'll cooperate. After all, as Dojin chillingly notes, hiding a body isn't too hard. The following day, Yunhai meets up with Detective Choi Tae for more updates on their investigation. Choi Tae informs her about the men he's been tasked to look into, Kim Song-jin, who vanished without a trace a year ago, and Lee Sang-do, a gambler and fraudster recently arrested. Yunhai listens carefully, noting down every detail, especially about Lee Sang-do, whose time seems to be running out. A silence settles over them, and Yunhai breaks it by asking what's bothering Choi Tae. He admits that he feels uneasy investigating without knowing the full context, but he doesn't want to pry. Yunhai reassures him that their goal is simple, to catch criminals. She urges him to dig deeper into Kim Song-jin's case, looking into his family background and criminal history, just like he did with Park Min. After a moment of contemplation, Choi Tae gives Yunhai's suggestion a shrug of approval. After all, she wouldn't steer him wrong, right? He turns to his assistant, passing the task of investigating Kim Song-jin onto him. The assistant blinks in surprise. Isn't he supposed to handle the digital side of things, not fieldwork? He quickly declines the offer, insisting that this sort of job is more Choi Tae's speed. Yunhai watches the friendly banter unfold, amused by their forgetfulness of her presence. With a small smile playing on her lips, Yunhai turns her attention back to her research notes. She flips through the pages, her eyes scanning the information about Lee Sang-do. One detail catches her eye: he once shared a home with a woman and a 7-year-old boy. She flips another page and finds a picture of the young boy. Halting the men's playful argument, she asks if the boy is Lee Sang's biological son. The assistant stammers out a response, suggesting it's a possibility, given the years the child has lived with Lee Sang. Yunhai is taken aback by this revelation. The boy, Si-woo, is Lee Sang-do's son? This is news to both her and Dojin. In her mind's eye, she sees them all as a family, sharing stories before bedtime. It's hard to reconcile this image with the lengths Dojin would go to harm those who crossed him. Knowing this, she resolves to reach the boy before Dojin does. Meanwhile, at a cozy restaurant, Dojin appears to be one step ahead. He sits across from Si-woo, treating the young boy to a feast of spicy rice cakes. As Si-woo chatters away about his favorite foods, Dojin listens with a patient smile, promising to spoil him with all the tasty meals he desires. Afterward, Dojin escorts Si-woo home. Before leaving, he slips something into the boy's pocket, instructing him to give it to his mother when she arrives home. As Dojin exits the apartment complex, he senses eyes on him. Glancing around, he spots a car parked nearby. With a knowing smirk, he approaches the vehicle, politely asking the driver to roll down the window. Detective Choi Tae obliges, leaning out of the driver's seat. He nudges Yunhai, who's hiding in the passenger seat, to do the same. but she's too shy to make her presence known. In the quiet solitude of Choi's car, Dojin and Yunhai sit in an almost deafening silence. It's one of those moments where thoughts are loud enough to fill the air. Yunhai's mind races. She needs to ask about Siwoo, but how can she without revealing her reasons for keeping tabs on Dojin? Fortunately, it's Dojin who breaks the ice, asking why she's here. Yunhai, quick on her feet, comes up with a fib that she's trying to prevent a dream from becoming reality. She just wants to ensure there's no trouble brewing. Dojin seems somewhat relieved by her vague explanation, but is still left with a nagging question: why is she going to such lengths for him? Despite knowing the dark path he's on, she's still rooting for him, investing time and resources. He can't help but question if he's even worth it. After a pause, Yunhai finally musters the courage to ask about Siwoo. Instead of answering, Dojin throws a question back at her, wondering if Siwoo features in her dreams. When Yunhai says she has no idea and asks him the same, he skillfully dodges the question again. It's clear he's evading on purpose. Then, in a surprising turn, he takes her hands, expressing his guilt over her getting hurt while trying to alter his future. He's genuinely puzzled why she's so drawn to him. Yunhai is taken aback by Dojin's emotional candor. It's uncharted territory. But she decides to ride the wave, playfully sharing her feelings for him and highlighting his qualities that captivate her. As she continues, Dojin's cheeks flush until she crosses a line, suggesting she'd like to see him undressed. Mortified, Yunhai claps a hand over her mouth. Did she really just blurt that out? Dojin, equally flustered, makes a move to exit the car, but Yunhai stops him, hastily explaining it's just part of her dreams. But Dojin's not having any of it, denying ever having such thoughts. Feeling rejected, Yunhai throws a mini tantrum. Despite his embarrassment, Dojin steps up, trying to soothe her. He reassures her that it's okay, after all, it's just a dream. This opens the door for Yunhai to confess her feelings and assert that he feels the same. She then shocks him with a sudden kiss. As they pull away, their eyes meet, and they kiss again. For Yunhai, it's a victory. She's been pursuing Dojin for 2 months, and now he's finally reciprocating. When they break apart, Dojin holds her close, advising her to keep her distance if things get too intense. That night, Yunhai finds herself replaying Dojin's parting words. What could he mean? Could it be related to the Mountain Muam case? She knows Kim Song-jin, the first victim, vanished without a trace a year ago. Park Min, the second victim, is now behind bars. And Lee Sang-do, the third victim, was severed from his life by Dojin, who now looks after his son. She saw today that Dojin knows Siwoo, but how? And where on earth is the boy's mother in all this? Yunhai's thoughts are spinning faster than a roller coaster ride. Between the case's twists and turns and her growing feelings for Dojin, she's struggling to keep her head above water. Choi-tae, sitting in the driver's seat, glances back and throws a curveball at her. Are you two dating? Yunhai's cheeks flame up instantly. She stammers out a quick no, trying to laugh it off. But inwardly, she's freaking out. Did he see anything earlier? She hopes not. But Choi remains silent, leaving her to stew in her embarrassment. With all the emotional turmoil, Choi-tae has some serious pondering to do. He's noticed Dojin's connections with both Park Min and Lee Sang-do's son, and can't shake off the feeling that Dojin is on a revenge mission. Sensing his unease, Yunhai decides to lighten the mood, suggesting he tint his car windows for better spying. Choi-tae chuckles, explaining that tinted windows would only raise suspicions, and renting different cars would be a costly affair. Yunhai nods, deciding it's best to keep her thoughts to herself for the rest of the ride. Well, she tries. But the sight of a wedding photo stuck on the dashboard gets her curiosity piqued again. Choi-tae cuts her off before she can ask, assuring her it's nothing to worry about. Yunhai decides to drop it and stays quiet for the rest of the journey. Later that night, Dojin awakens from a bizarre dream, his heart pounding. It takes him a moment to steady his breath and gather his thoughts. As he settles back into the bed, his hand brushes against something wet. His eyes widen in disbelief. No way. Could he have had a wet dream? The calm serenity of the morning is lost on Dojin. He wakes up flustered, his cheeks burning from a dream that felt all too real. Yunhai was there in his dream, setting his senses aflame in ways he never thought possible. He groans as he realizes it's happened again. Hoping a hot shower might help him regain control, he steps into the bathroom, but it only intensifies his restlessness. Because now, instead of just in his dreams, Yunhai has started invading his waking hours too. Is he daydreaming? He laughs at himself. Talk about going off the deep end. Dojin is bewildered by these new sensations. It feels like he's going through puberty all over again, and every attempt to rein in his feelings ends in failure. What confuses him even more is that these feelings are exclusively for Yunhai. Why her and not other women? Is it because he hasn't been satisfying his physical needs? Or could it be love? The mere thought sends him into a whirlwind of confusion. Just as he's trying to make sense of it all, his phone buzzes from the kitchen counter. His heart skips a beat when he sees Yunhai's name on the screen. Taking a deep breath, he answers the call, managing to stammer out a greeting. On the other end, Yunhai sounds cheerful, telling him how much she misses him and how she wishes she could see him today, but her exams are getting in the way. She doesn't let the conversation end there, though. She proposes a date, but Dojin quickly declines, saying he'll be busy. They go back and forth until they finally agree on a Sunday. Smiling, Yunhai tells him she'll book a room for them and all he has to do is show up. Before he can respond, she ends the call with a soft goodbye. Dojin is left standing there, phone in hand, mind racing. Did she say a room? Dojin becomes scared because, just like today, Yunhai made an appointment like this in the past. In the next scene, a strange man with a hoodie on is seen leaving an apartment and making interactions with another man. The man with the hoodie hands the other man a phone, telling him that he had saved a number there for him before telling him that the director says he should pay bus debt. After their interaction, the other man takes out the phone that was handed to him and calls the number that was saved on it. The caller on the other line answers, and it's none other than Dojin. The man introduces himself as Lee Sang-do, the mysterious man Dojin was chasing the other night. Lee Sang-do goes straight to the point to give Dojin the little information he knows about what happened that night. He tells Dojin about seeing a little boy at the villa that night who met with him and asked about the person related to Dojin's father. However, Lee Sang-lol didn't disclose any information to the man and he cleared all the evidence. Dojin listens closely to every word that the man on the other line has to say, remembering that he had met with the boy before and dealt with him multiple times. The next day, Mr. Lee, Yunhai's father, is seen attending an elaborate party with other prestigious men and women surrounding him. In the busy room, he is seen trying to answer a call, but as he tries to get to the person on the other line, Mrs. Lee snatches the phone out from his hand and ends the call. Furious, she asks her husband why he is always in the habit of taking her phone away from her, and he tells her that he did what he had to do because the phone kept ringing and pissing him off. Seeing how annoyed she is getting, he pushes her closer to himself, as if trying to mark his territory, and tells her to relax, that they aren't strangers. As they stay tangled up in each other's company, Mr. Lee's brother walks up to them and thanks him for attending the party, before going on to talk about how different it is for his brother to switch from being a doctor to the president of their family's company. As the brothers talk about business, Mrs. Lee seems to be irritated by it all, and so she takes action to speak to her brother-in-law herself. She goes forward to them and starts yapping about how bad her brother-in-law is at keeping the family business alive, even after he borrowed some money from their father. She even goes ahead to advise him on keeping the only hotel left and protecting it well, promising to recommend a professional trader if he ever neglects it. After badmouthing her husband's brother right in his face, she walks away like she said the most casual thing ever. A few minutes later, Mr. Lee is seen chasing his wife down the hall and it seems like she's mad at something, but it's hard to place a finger on it since she's always so hot-tempered. She turns to him and tells him her mind, because he smiles like an idiot and ignores the words of his family doesn't mean she has to stand there and take the disrespect too. As Mr. Lee tries to calm his wife down by assuring her that everything is okay and that she doesn't have to let the words of his brother shake her, she pulls him by the hem of his jacket and kisses him right there like there is no one watching. Shocked by the unexpected display of affection, he pushes her off him and asks what she is doing, which she gives a simple reply to standing in status. After the whole drama about status and reputation, Mrs. Lee heads back to their car and tells the chauffeur to get the vehicle moving without waiting for the president. As the car drives down the road, she begins to crack her big brain on what her husband must have said on the phone while they were at the party. We are also taken back to a conversation Mrs. Lee had before the party. She is seen on the phone with an unknown caller who threatens her about a secret only they share. The caller tells her everything they know about her husband illegally transplanting VIP organs for money, and she is shocked by the revelation, but before she can go on with the conversation, her husband barges into the room and asks if she's ready for the party, to which she said yes to and allows him to lead the way. In the next scene, everything seems to take a more dramatic turn. Dojin is seen pulling Lee Sang-do from a bathroom sink full of water as he interrogates him on what happened the night his parents got assassinated. From the look of things, Lee Sang-do isn't being cooperative as Dojin would want him to be, even though he swears that he is telling the truth. After so much torture, Lee Sang-do tells Dojin that there was a lady who was engaged to his father and so they both built their riches together. However, after a while, his father got greedy and decided to do away with the lady and clear all evidence using Lee Sang-do's help. Dojin listens attentively to every word but still finds it hard to believe what is being said to him. He thinks Lee Sang-do took the money and ran away with it, so he does the most obvious thing there is to do, find proof. He picks up the culprit's phone and lets him speak to the person on the other line who has been his frequent dialer. Dojin listens to their conversations closely, especially the part where the person on the other line orders Lee Sang-do to take a notebook and some information about Kong Lee-yoon's son to a secret address in 2 days. Shaking with fear, he asks the person on the other line about the possibility of him returning home, and the person simply advises him to try to stay alive and not cross his limits because at the end of the mission, he will get a big reward. Done with listening to all the talking, Dojin hangs up the call and asks one very important question: where is the notebook? Later that evening, with the wind and quietness of the night filling the air, Dojin pays Yunhai a surprise visit. With her signature bad ankle, she manages to walk to him, and when she is just inches away from him, she asks why he is there. Nothing could have prepared her for the answer she was about to receive. The nonchalant Dojin expresses his feelings for the first time and tells her that he misses her. Yunhai's mouth falls open as she stares at him in total awe, unable to comprehend what is being said to her. She asks him to repeat himself, so she can better understand, and he says it again, but he doesn't just stop there. He adds more fire to the flame by telling her that he likes her, and it feels like she's about to melt. She touches his face to see if she's talking to the fake version of him, but nothing gives it away. If it's the real him, then what is wrong with him? Dojin lets her do whatever it is she wants to do with his face, while he continues professing his feelings for her. And then without warning, he drops his head on her shoulder and tells her that he misses her again. This time, our main lead isn't just surprised, she doesn't know what to do with herself anymore. I miss you, Yunhai. The sentence resonates through her entire body, and she stands there like a lifeless doll, trying to get herself to react. After a few seconds of battling with her mind, she reaches out to Dojin and pulls him into her in the softest way possible, unburdening all her stress. Especially her academic stress, which seems to have evaporated the moment she touched him. They stay in each other's arms for a while, savoring every little second like it will be their last, until Yunhai casually states how random it is that he has to confess his feelings to her at such an ungodly hour of the night. But the awkwardness doesn't stop there. Dojin hugs her tighter and tells her that he is sorry, which still doesn't explain anything, so Yunhai asks what he is apologizing for. It takes him a moment before he begins to spill, because of how embarrassing it is for him to do so. With beads of sweat running down his face, he tells her that he has dreams of them doing some lovers' things together. Hearing this, Yunhai starts teasing him just like she used to when they were married, which makes Dojin blush so hard that he turns into a tomato. She stops immediately after seeing this, and they begin to talk about going on dates until he picks her up from the ground and initiates a kiss, which leaves her dumbfounded. They stay wrapped up in the moment as their desire burns deep into the night. The next morning, Detective Choi is seen ransacking Lee Sang-doo's house while on the phone with an unknown caller who seems to be just as acquainted with Lee Sang-doo as he is. They speak of his whereabouts, which none of them seem to have any idea about, and then the detective complains about how tiring it is to be a babysitter because he had to put Lee Sang-doo's son to rest since neither his father nor mother was at home when he arrived. He informs the person on the other line that if the boy's mother is not back, he will have to suspend finding Lee Sang-doo and looks for her instead. After all the rattling, he decides to investigate the man while the person on the other line comes to pick up the boy for safety reasons, and with that, he hangs up the call. As the detective continues to go through Lee Sang-doo's stuff, he comes across a card that fell out of his dress pocket and takes it up to examine it. In the next minute, he's on another call with Dojin, asking him if he knows the location of Choi Hyun-seo, Lee Sang-doo's wife. However, Dojin doesn't say anything but asks why he is being questioned about it, so the detective explains to him that he found a key that he intended to give her to the residents of a hotel and also adds that she hasn't gone home and she left her child behind. Dojin lets him know that he doesn't have information about the woman and that if he did know she wasn't at home with her child, he wouldn't have left the bot unattended. As he continues to talk to the detective on the other line, 3 black cars come out of nowhere and block his vehicle side on the road. The realization makes him swerve hard and come to an abrupt stop, which allows the detective to realize that there is actual danger. However, Dojin is wise enough to let Choi know that he needs his help before coming out of the car and coming face to face with a group of jacked-up men in black suits. They don't speak much, only letting him know that he is supposed to follow them without any resistance because if he does, there will be consequences. Reaching the secret location, Dojin is seated at a table, with a variety of dishes arranged neatly on the table. He turns a side eye to his abductor and tells him to introduce himself. At least that's the most he can do after snatching him out of his vehicle by his boys. Dojin's kidnapper is no other than Mr. Lee Yunhai's father. Seated at an entirely different table, he speaks about how distasteful it is to him that Yunhai is seen with Dojin and he tells him the reason for his abduction. He wants to know Dojin's purpose for approaching his daughter, which doesn't make any sense because he acts as if he hates her. This realization doesn't skip past Dojin as he tells Mr. Lee what's on his mind. How could he hide his daughter, hate her, and pretend not to know her, but do all these dramatic stunts behind her back? Mr. Lee stays unfazed and asks if he can pour Dojin some drink, to which he declines to. The older man comments on Dojin's non-drinking habit and links it to his parents, which immediately makes him alert and he decides to switch the topic from Yunhai to his parents. Mr. Lee keeps talking, telling him that he investigated his life a little bit and that Dojin has a face exactly like that of his father. Dojin's ears perk up at the sound of every piece of information spilt out by the other man. He becomes so invested that he leaves his table and goes to join Mr. Lee on his side of the table. And though he is almost stopped by one of the bodyguards, he makes his way through so he can come face to face with the old man. They talk a little about his father and then Mr. Lee switches the topic back to Yunhai once again, telling him that she is a weakness in his life and he will want nothing more than to have her and Dojin disappear from his life for good. Every single word coming from the older man's mouth feels like a thorn in Dojin's flesh, but somehow, he maintains his cool. However, when Mr. Lee refers to her as a debt that he doesn't want, Dojin loses it instantly. He tries to lunge at the other man with so much strength that it takes not 1 but 2 bodyguards to keep him down. Seeing that his supposed victim isn't within arm's reach, he glares at him and promises not to take it lightly with him if he ever tries to take advantage of Yunhai's weakness. Even with all the uproar, Mr. Lee still maintains his calm. He turns to his guards and orders them to let Dojin go and also that they evacuate the room. Everyone does as they are told except for one of the guards who insists on staying until he is practically yelled at by his boss. He hesitates for a while before leaving the 2 men alone to discuss their business. As soon as the room is empty of extra bodies, Mr. Lee leans in and asks Dojin if he remembers that he saved him 16 years ago because Yunhai's mother wanted him to do so. Telling the story sounds fishy to Dojin, so he questions Mr. Lee about his purpose for kidnapping him and that's when the older man stops beating around the bush. He wants Dojin to help him eliminate all histories of himself, including his identity as Kang Lee-yoon's son, to avoid the people from his past, and if he doesn't, he'd have to eliminate Dojin himself, no matter the level of honesty he has with his daughter Yunhai. Dojin's eyes almost drop to the floor at the statement, but he tries so much to conceal his emotions. He recalls back to the time Yunhai let him in on some family history and also on the night when Lee Sang-do made a phone call with an unknown caller, and right there, everything begins to make a little more sense. In the next scene, Dojin is seen in the comfort of his car, listening attentively to a conversation between Mrs. Lee and Lee Sang-do, who asks him for the notebook and if there is another copy made of it. When she gets hold of the book, she lights it up and watches it burn to flames. Then, she questions Lee Sang-do after Dojin. Lee Sang-do answers every question with fear, telling her that he has only met with Dojin once and that he wants revenge on his parents because of what happened the night of their assassination. Mrs. Lee goes ahead to ask if he remembers his face, and he says yes, because he doesn't have a face that is hard to forget. Seated elegantly on the bench, she beckons her bodyguard and he moves forward, takes his phone out of his pocket, produces a picture of Dojin and flashes it in Lee Sang-do's face, and without hesitation, he confirms that he is the guy that they want. The bodyguard looks at Lee Sang-do straight in the eyes and asks the question again. This time, he changes his answer about the identity of the man in the picture, telling Mrs. Lee that the man in the picture isn't Kang Lee-yoon's son Dojin but only a look-alike. She approves of his information and orders her bodyguard to delete the photo and send Lee Sang-do some money for his cooperation. Lee Sang-do bows in appreciation and promises to call her and give her all the information she needs once he gets to meet Dojin again, and with that, he takes his bag full of cash and leaves. Back in the car, Dojin receives a message from Detective Choi about Yunhai and Sii Woo, Lee Sang-do's son, sleeping in the office, and how hard it is to take the boy out of her clutches. Dojin sighs at the random message and promises to meet up with them in an hour. Still listening to the conversation between Lee Sang-do and Mrs. Lee, Dojin fixes up his earphones and pays attention. As Lee Sang-do climbs up the stairs to leave, Mrs. Lee, who is not entirely satisfied with the information given to her, seeing that she paid $2 billion for the evidence, interrogates the other man on whether he still has more information than he might be gatekeeping, but he assures her that he doesn't, and he also warns her not to say anything about their transaction. The last warning might have undone the little screw holding her sanity together, because as soon as she hears it, she signals her bodyguard to push Lee Sang-do down the stairs. Grunting in pain and obvious distress, Mrs. Lee walks up to him and tells him that is the price he has to pay for threatening her. With a devious smirk, she throws her last order for the night: he will lie quietly in the hospital until Dojin visits him again. A few minutes later, the bodyguard who has been going around with Mrs. Lee gets into a discreet area of his hotel apartment and calls Mr. Lee on the phone, telling him about every transaction that went on with Lee Sang-do and his wife. He also tells his boss that his wife suspects that Dojin is Kang Lee-yoon's son, so he offers to find someone who looks like him, so Mrs. Lee will not think that it's Dojin who has been meeting up with Lee Sang-do, but somebody else who looks like him. His boss agrees to the idea and tells him to go ahead with the plan, and the bodyguard promises to do his best, with no disappointments attached. Later that evening, Dojin visits Yunhai and Sii Woo as he promised. Opening the office door, he sees the two lying comfortably in bed. As he stares at them in admiration, Detective Choi's assistant pops his head out of the door, expresses his discomfort with them being around, and tells Dojin to do something about it. Dojin steps forward and continues to gaze at them so hard that it feels like he is losing track of time. He even takes a seat close to them and continues to admire the adorable match. He realizes right there how much Yunhai means to him and how far he is ready to go to protect her, even if it's from her father. He also recalls some of the information given to him by Mr. Lee earlier about how dangerous Mrs. Lee, Yunhai's stepmother, is, because once she finds out his true identity, no one is safe, including Yunhai. Deep in thought, he puts his hand through her hair and begins to pet her in her sleep until her eyes fall open. As soon as she gets up, she hushes Dojin not to make a sound because little Sii Woo is still asleep, and she drags him out of there to the stairs where they can talk freely. She tells Dojin that when she came to visit, Siiwoo was crying for his mother, so she decided to stay with him until the woman returned because she heard from Detective Choi that Lee Sang-doo is an avid gambler and drunk who beats up Siiwoo whenever he loses. Yunhai continues to tell him everything she knows about Lee Sang-doo in low tones that Dojin has to ask why they are whispering, and she replies that it is because she doesn't want anyone to know about what she is saying. However, he insists that she doesn't since they are the only ones around and she wonders why he has to change the topic. Anyways, she continues to feed him with more information after the little distraction. She continues her story by telling him that she found the hotel card that he gave to Siiwoo's mother before asking him if he knows where Lee Sang-doo is. Again, Dojin tries to distract her from the topic and asks her if she is prepared for her exams the next day. He tells her not to worry about anything that is going on and promises to take Siiwoo to a safe place while he looks for both the child's parents. Even with all the reassurance and a little petting here and there, Yunhai doesn't seem to be backing down. The next morning after her exams, Yunhai lies in her bed, thinking about how hard it was to get the same high points as she did before the last time she wrote it. It is probably because, in the past, she wasn't trying to solve a case of homicide like she's trying to do now. Her mind goes back to the men she so desperately wants to find, Moon Jong-hwan and Kim In-cheol. She also begins to do a lot of deep thinking about the house she bought in the middle of the semester and how it belonged to the girl who went missing, you know? The one Park Min-hyuk tried to do away with. Why is she suddenly thinking about this girl? Her belongings are still in the girl's house, especially her important stuff. And now that she stays in a hotel room, she is thinking of going there to bring back all the necessary things she needs to make her life comfortable again. Good thing she didn't unpack those boxes. She's also grateful for everything her mother left behind for her because now, she doesn't have financial problems. As she lies there thinking about her life, she gets a message from Jae-won, a popular guy in school, asking her on a date to a fantastic restaurant. She tosses her phone aside in frustration and prepares herself for what is to come. In the next scene, our main lead is seen sitting awkwardly with her head reposed, and on the opposite end of the table is Jan-won. He strikes up a conversation with her on how she sees the food and she tells him that it's good, knowing that she doesn't like European food that much. Her date apologizes for not asking about her preferences before bringing her out, but she brushes it off as it is not a big deal. As she stays in her lane, unable to keep up with the conversation coming her way, Jae-won, on the other hand, doesn't keep shut for 1 minute. If he isn't complimenting her, he's telling her of something he heard about her. As they speak, our attention shifts to a man sitting just in the corner. And from what he is wearing, it looks like he is being sent by someone to spy on Yunhai and her date. The spy yawns, raising his sleepy head, and we get to know that it is Seo-won, Dojin's friend. With all his spy gadgets intact, including his earphones which he uses to communicate with his friend, he sits up showing that he is ready for business. On the other line, Dojin complains of how sleepy he is, and he tells him to keep his mouth shut. Earlier that day, Dojin had called Seo-won to his car to discuss a few things he'd want him to do for him. He tells him that he knows Yunhai is about to go on a date with Jae-won, since he overheard it at the hospital when Yunhai's friends came around, remember? He tells his friend that he wants him to spy on them for his sake, to which the other man instantly declines, telling him that all he has to do was confess his feelings to Yunhai and seal the deal. Dojin explains to him that he has already done that and he just needs him to follow her around since he doesn't trust the guy she is going out with. Again, Seo-won tells his friend that it isn't a good idea and that he doesn't want to be a part of it. He even advises him to do it himself since he wants to stalk her so bad, but Doji gives his reasons not to and compels his friend to do it instead. Defeated, Seo-won agrees to it and now, he is seated at a restaurant spying on an innocent girl with his mouth stuffed with food. As the waitress takes care of both Yunhai and Jae-won's meal, she mistakenly drops a glass of water, making it spill all over his trousers. Immediately after this happens, the waitress drops into a salvo of apologies and runs off to get something to clean the mess she made. Yunhai offers him some towels and promises that the water print isn't so noticeable on his trousers, while also thinking about how polite he is even in a situation like this. CO1, on the other hand, stays calm and reports every single thing that has just occurred to his friend on the other line. As Jae-won excuses himself to the bathroom, Yunhai thinks about how weird it is for him to be so kind and polite, but in the future, he leaves her friend, So-young, to get married to another woman. It feels like it isn't the same guy at all. Or is it just pretend? Even in the future when Jae-won and So-young were dating, they never for once fought and they seemed to love and trust each other so much. So, why the change? Just as Yunhai is trying to analyze the whole situation, she spots him in the hallway with one of the waitresses, smiling and talking like they have known each other for quite a while. He is even blushing and laughing as they speak. When he comes back to the table, Yunhai goes into full detective mode and questions him about his relationship with the staff he was talking to. He tells her that she is just a friend of his and Yunhai can feel something in her heat up. Just a friend? She tells him that she is a bit sensitive on that topic because a friend of hers dated a guy for 3 years, but he ended up having an affair with a friend, impregnating her and then marrying her. And from the way the story goes, it seems like the guy liked his female friend before dating her friend. Nonetheless, Jae-won tells her that the man might not have liked his female friend but used it as an excuse, because if he didn't do it with his female friend, he'd probably do it with someone else. Yunhai thinks about what he said and doesn't make much out of it. She tells him that his friend who is a waitress likes him and she will begin to set her eyes on him very soon. It's just a matter of time. After telling him her mind on the whole situation she had just experienced, Yunhai grabs her bag and decides to leave the date, requesting that he tell Ja Kyung, the friend that hooked them up on the date, that he doesn't like her. As she heads out, CO1 tells Dojin that she is about to leave while he enjoys his free meal in peace, or so he thinks. Yunhai steps out in total frustration, grumbling about how annoying the date was because now she can see Jae-won for who he truly is, a flirt and a liar. As she goes out, nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Jae-won comes out of nowhere and grabs her by the arm, forcefully asking her where she got all the information about him from and if she has been investigating him, but Yunhai tells him that she didn't need to investigate to know that he is a potential cheat since he always shows that he likes other girls from his comments and the images he posts on his social media accounts. The truth must have hurt because he grabs her hands a little tighter, hurting her in the process as she begs for him to let her go. And when he doesn't, Dojin comes to her rescue like a knight in shining armor. He pushes Yunhai to the side and grabs Jae-won firmly. Surprised by the sudden intrusion, he asks the dark-haired man who he is and why he's interfering with something that is not his business. Dojin warns him to stay off and later lets him go. Due to the commotions heard, CO1 blows his cover by popping his head out and looking at them in total confusion. After the failed date, Dojin offers to take Yunhai back to her hotel room. While they sit in the parking lot of the hotel enjoying each other's company, they begin to make plans about their date to visit the sea, but Yunhai doesn't seem interested at all. No, she isn't eager to go on the date at all, because of how guilty she feels after Dojin sees her on a date with another man. She tries to mend her ways by explaining why she had to go on the date in the first place. She tells him that in her dream, her friend dated Jae-won for 3 years and he had a baby with his ex-girlfriend before getting married to her and leaving her friend heartbroken, so in order to avoid history repeating itself, she went on a date with him instead. She gets on her knees and begins to apologize to him for liking him but still going out with another man, but Dojin tells her that it is all okay, that he isn't angry about anything and that he believes everything that she is saying to him even though she says that it is all from a dream. After all the talk about dreams and déjà vu, they start to talk about their feelings again and this time, Yunhai takes the lead to initiate some form of physical intimacy. She takes his hand so he can feel her heart beating in her chest and then she kisses him right there on the lips and it takes only a second for him to kiss her back. Even with knowing everything about him from his past to his future, Yunhai is still determined to not just like him but to also love him endlessly. Still caught up in their business, Yunhai, who always takes the bigger step in their relationship, decides to snatch the opportunity and make their session a degree hotter. Realizing where this might lead them, Dojin stops her before they get too carried away and explains that they still have a lot of time to do what they want to do. However, for tonight, they should try keeping their hands to themselves. You would think that being rejected would stop Yunhai's drive, but it only increases it as she wants nothing more than to tease him again and again. Overwhelmed with emotions that she cannot act on, she burst into tears and now Dojin has to cater to her every need. He tries to reassure her and tells her that he doesn't hate her, but he is only trying to keep her for the right time, but Yunhai continues to cry because she doesn't know how long she is going to wait for what she desperately wants. Weeks? Months? Or worse, years. She tries to talk her way into him making love to her, and with the way things are going, it looks like she's getting there because in the blink of an eye, Dojin becomes the one asking for it. With a smile of victory, Yunhai asks him what he wants to do, and he finally tells what he wants and how long he has been keeping it to himself because he is scared that if they do anything, she might leave him. He doesn't stop there with his confession. He also professes that it was not a coincidence that they met at the restaurant earlier today, but that he heard her tell her friends about the date in the hospital and followed her there. He tells her of his insecurities, and she promises to be of good behavior, avoiding other men at all costs. All this talk triggers something in Dojin, and with Yunhai's consent, he gently lifts her from the sofa and takes her to the bedroom. The next day, with the morning air blowing down the soft sheets of their bed, Dojin's eyes flutter open to the beautiful view in front of him. He hugs Yunhai a little tighter as she still drowns in deep sleep. As he stares at her, visions from the night before flash before his eyes, making him turn a bright shade of red. The flashbacks don't just make him blush, but also make his heart race so fast that Yunhai wakes up from the loud thump. She adds fuel to the fire by calling him Appa and asks why his heart is beating so fast. He can't lie, the reason is right in front of him. With love filling the air that morning, Dojin and Yunhai set out on their official date at the sea. The weather seems a bit gloomy, which makes him worried about her health. As Dojin dresses Yunhai's coat to prevent her from catching a cold, she speaks about how beautiful the sea is, and then he gives her a rundown of how they will spend their day. Suddenly, it begins to snow as they speak, and luckily for them, Dojin carries an umbrella with him. With everything happening, her life begins to look like a movie, and it makes Yunhai love every bit of the moment so much that she confesses her true feelings to Dojin, that she doesn't just like him, she loves him and she doesn't ever want to leave him for anything. Dojin in turn does the same, saying the 3 words so softly that it's enough to make any woman melt, and then to prove his point, he kisses her and it feels just like a movie. After visiting the beautiful sea, the next plan for our new couple was to visit a game place. When they arrive, Yunhai suggests that they place a bet to make the game more interesting. Whoever loses will have to grant the wishes of the winner. Dojin immediately seals the deal as he sees no reason to be scared. Round 1 begins and Yunhai is all fierce and determined to be the winner so Dojin can grant her wish of telling her more about Lee Sang-do. Seeing how focused she is, Dojin gets a little bit worried about what she will want if she wins, because, in the end, he doesn't want anything special. Their fight begins with lots of bangs, and it doesn't take a while before Yunhai's handsome date smiles in victory. He won. The second round starts up and Dojin asks if she would like to continue, and she tells him that she's capable. This time, no bangs. All they have to do is throw some basketballs into the basket, and even when the game changes, the winner remains the same. Yunhai pants from all the hard work that didn't pay off in the end. She tells Dojin that he can make any wish he wants, but if doesn't make the wish in 1 month, she will no longer be able to grant it for him. She then tells him it's almost time for them to check into their hotel room, rest and then have dinner. Dojin becomes nervous about the statement and tells her that he would like to go to a bookstore close to them. At the bookstore, Dojin stuffs his whole face in a book to avoid everything relating to Yunhai because of how uneasy she makes him feel. Yunhai, who doesn't realize the impact that she has on him, sneaks up on him and asks what he is reading. Dojin explains the book to her, saying that it is from one of his favorite authors and has been turned into a movie. During their conversation, Dojin asks her a very thrilling question: "You are not dreaming of the future, but you are from the future, right?" Yunhai stands there like a lost puppy, unable to comprehend what is being said to her. When she finally finds the words, she tells him that she has been having dreams about the future and that she is not from the future, before running off to avoid being interrogated some more. After being in the bookstore for so long, Dojin and Yunhai leave without purchasing any books, and when she asks about why he didn't get a book for himself, he simply tells her that he disliked the ending of the book he was reading. Yunhai requests that they go home now, but Dojin in turn offers that they go to the shopping mall, because he wants to get some clothes for himself, and so they do. Exhausted from shopping, our main lead tells her date that they are going home, but he has way bigger plans. He suggests that they both grab a cup of coffee before going home. After coffee, it becomes dark outside and Yunhai sees this as the right time to go home, but Dojin offers that they go out to eat grilled snails. When will this ever end? Yunhai catches on and demands an explanation for his behavior, and all she gets is lies about how he wants to stay outside some more. She finally decides on how their night will end. They will both go for dinner and then head home after that. Now at the restaurant, Yunhai happily gulps down some wine and insists that Dojin does the same. He takes only a small tug from his cup and retires for the night, telling her that he doesn't drink that much, but she pushes that he at least finishes one bottle of soju wine. After contemplating what could happen, he agrees with the idea because what's the worst that can happen? The answer is a lot. A lot can happen from being drunk. Dojin's life flashes before his eyes as he experiences what being drunk for the first time feels like. He has so many questions. Did Yunhai deliberately let him drink too much? And if yes, why? Dojin still wallows in disbelief at how much alcohol he has for the night as Yunhai takes half of his weight on her shoulder and carries him out of the restaurant down the road. After walking a few steps away from the food place, she chooses to get him an antidote for his situation because he is too heavy for her to carry to their room. She tries to excuse herself, but Dojin wraps his hand around her to prevent her from leaving him alone. Acting like a big baby, Yunhai puts a hand through his hair and asks him if he is scared of becoming intimate with her, because what else would explain the stunt he pulled off whenever she tried to get them home? She promises not to pass any advances if he doesn't like it, but he tells her that he does, so she takes the chance to clarify that they are both adults and can do whatever they like. After hearing this, Dojin tells her that he is scared of going in that direction since it is the first time he has ever had such feelings before, and with that, Yunhai recognizes that she has been rushing him and trying to take their relationship to another level too fast, which might make him feel that it is lust instead of love. She realizes her wrong and tells him to take his time on anything he would like to do to her. While they are still tangled up in their conversations and emotions, Dojin makes a simple request, that he will love to hug her, and she grants it in a heartbeat. Back at their place, Dojin drunkenly falls to the bed and dozes off to sleep without even a warning. Yunhai comes to the room and sees him lying there on the bed with his full clothes on and without him brushing his teeth and scolds him on why he has to sleep like that. She gets on the bed and tries to get him into consciousness by calling out his name and tapping him gently on the chest. Dojin's eyes finally snap open to reality, and before Yunhai can start nagging about how he should go wash his face, he grabs her by the face and begins to mumble some sweet words. He even calls her his girlfriend in the process, which is a big deal. Yunhai sees that she might not be able to get out of bed again once she's all cuddled up with him, so tries to excuse herself so she can freshen up because she feels a little uncomfortable from reeking like alcohol. However, Dojin doesn't let her leave his sight. Instead, he crawls up to her and begins to shower her with kisses, which feels so good, but Yunhai is determined to take it slow with him. Since he isn't backing down on his advances, she offers to go into the shower and wash up for him, and instantly, he takes off and goes to another room. Got him. Next, we see Detective Choi in the hospital where Lee Sang-do is being admitted. As he tries to get the necessary information he can lay his hands on, he can relay everything he knows back to Yunhai. As he takes photos of Lee Sang-do in his hospital bed, he starts to think deeply about how Dojin knows so much about the man, because at first, when he was trying so hard to get a lead on Lee Sang-do's location, it was Dojin who put him on where he was going to be. Choi remembers a few days back when he was spying on Lee Sang-do in his motel room, he came across the camera he had placed being out of order, and instantly he knew that someone else was tracking the same man that he was stalking. After a little investigation, he found out that the man was no other than Dojin, and that was when they put their heads together for the case of Lee Sang-do. Dojin told him that Lee Sang-do had been admitted into room 508 of Sane Hospital in the name of another person, and he also advised him to be careful of the staff and also of Yunhai. Back at their apartment, Yunhai checks her phone for any new information about Lee Sang-do that Detective Choi might have sent for her, since he is to report to her every hour about whatever news he finds. She needs to find out all the information about the bad guys so she can protect her beloved Dojin from his horrible future, so they can live happily. In the extravagant mansion of the Lee family, we find Mr. Lee in his study room, attending to business like all the wealthy men do. As he stays there in silence with his thoughts and his work, his wife walks in with a pretty night dress and asks why he hasn't slept yet. He explains the obvious reason to her, and as soon as he finishes his explanation, there is a bottle of red wine on his table. He knows his wife wants some form of attention, but he is not ready to give her that just yet. So he tells her that he is busy with work and would like for that to remain so. Mrs. Lee doesn't listen to her husband. Instead, she begins to flirt with him while they talk about how her week has been with her meddling in matters related to Kang Lee-yoon and Lee Sang-do. She tells her husband not to worry about anything and that all she has to do is find Kang Lee-yoon's son, Dojin, and the rest will be history. The relationship they both share is transactional since they hold great secrets about each other, and that's why it is easy for Mrs. Lee to control her husband. The night passes and morning comes, fresh and full of regret. Dojin is still lying in bed, looking as innocent as ever when suddenly, his eyes flew open. It isn't something to worry about though, because it isn't a terrifying dream but memories from his drunken night that has come to haunt him. He blushes and falls back into bed, covering his face from all the embarrassment, and as soon as he hears Yunhai's footsteps, he pretends to be fast asleep. When she comes closer to him, the first thing she notices is how red his face is. Dojin, on the other hand, is sweating so hard because he doesn't know what to do now she is close to him. Not knowing how to keep up with the pretense, he opens his eyes and greets her warmly. She asks if he's fine and tries to find out if he has any symptoms of a hangover, but from his response, he seems alright. He tells her that he will go to the orphanage since he is off duty from work. During their conversation, Dojin reminds her that tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and so Yunhai begins to make calculations on how she will pay for her hotel room. Because of how worried she is about where to stay, he offers that she stay with him until she can find her balance, and new information leaves her so excited that she jumps on him and thanks him. She even proposes to go with him to the orphanage tomorrow and promises to cook great meals and spend some fun time with the children there. It isn't something new, because she does it with him every year in the future. Later that day, Yunhai moves into Dojin's apartment and it feels like they are a married couple already. How adorable. As she takes her luggage to her new room, she begins to unpack and arrange her clothes in the wardrobe while thinking of how easy it will be to keep an eye on him now he is at close range. And it seems like she isn't the only one having deep thoughts about the new improvement, because Dojin's mind is going wild from the realization that he will now be staying with Yunhai for a while. How will he be able to resist his urges? It seems like he has fallen into a big trap. After Yunhai finishes unpacking, she goes to the other room and finds Dojin spreading a blanket on the floor to sleep. Shocked, she asks if he finds it uncomfortable to sleep in the same bed with her, and he stammers some answers that make no sense, so she convinces him that since they are in a relationship, it won't hurt if they sleep in the same bed. Her little speech worked because, at the end of everything, they share the same bed that night, with Yunhai sleeping so peacefully and Dojin finding it hard to close his eyes when she's just right there. He gets up slowly so he doesn't wake her and begins to stare at the breathtaking view in front of him. Truly, he hadn't seen a woman as beautiful as her before. And he doesn't just want to see her, he also wants to feel her in his arms, his lips, and everywhere. After long minutes of gazing at her beauty, he bids her good night with a soft kiss. The next morning, Mr. Lee sets out for business with his favorite bodyguard, who gives him in detail how his day has been planned and the meetings he is supposed to attend. He acknowledges every statement and keeps moving. The bodyguard then proceeds to tell him that Yunhai moved her luggage out of her hotel room to Dojin's house, which is now her new place of residence. A lot of reactions are expected from Mr. Lee, but a calm one isn't part of it. He answers to the information so calmly that his bodyguard becomes worried on his behalf and tells him that Dojin might be a threat, but Mr. Lee brushes it off. Years back when Mr. Lee was young, he met with Hannah, Yunhai's mother, in school and they both fell in love. One day in school, Lee finds her in one of the bushes looking for something and after a little bit of questioning, she tells him that she had lost her necklace and she is trying to find it. He helped her out of the bushes and promised to find the necklace for her and in no time, he came back with it as assured. Hannah observed the necklace in her as it was the same as the one Yunhai had. The relic belonged to her mother who passed it on to her and it was no ordinary relic because their very relic could make anyone go back in the past. Yes, I think we all know what the necklace is capable of doing at this point. Back to the present, Mr. Lee and his wife are attending a prestigious wedding in the front row and while everything else is going on, his wife turns to him and begins to flirt shamelessly and within minutes, they take it private. After their hot session, Mrs. Lee falls asleep leaving her husband alone to think back on his life and the decision he had made. He remembers every single thing that happened in the past and he knows his daughter used the necklace to go to the past. He remembers everything, even the time he made a big mistake that ruined his first marriage and his relationship with his daughter. He recalls how furious his wife was that day and how much anger was in her eyes, and it is the same eyes Yunhai uses to stare at him. He lost everything, but at what cost and who else is there to blame but himself? The next day, Yunhai slowly draws herself from sleep and this time she realizes that Dojin woke up before her. She gets out of bed and goes around the house in search of her boyfriend and she finds him on his way out of the bathroom. As soon as he appears in his black robe and messy hair, Yunhai finds it hard to breathe. She mutters something that sounds like a greeting and smiles sheepishly at him. Aware of the effect he has on her, Dojin moves a little too close to her and Yunhai almost melts by the sudden confidence that is being displayed at such early hours of the morning. She backs away for her good but he keeps pushing forward as if trying to make her reach her breaking point. He teases her for a moment until she starts to feel comfortable and begins to take the lead. Dojin becomes numb and starts running away from her, just like he usually does. In a few moments, they arrive at the orphanage and Dojin introduces Yunhai to his auntie and his friend Seo-won. Even though they have met before at the hospital, today he introduces her to them as his girlfriend. It's official. Auntie shares her excitement and tells Yunhai that she didn't need to visit them, but she is happy that she showed up and that is when Seo-won decides to open his big mouth and expose his mother, telling his guest that she was looking forward to meeting her. With a stiff smile, Auntie takes her hand to his back and punches him, making him fall to the floor in pain. Serves him right for having such a loud mouth. Auntie tries as much as possible to make Yunhai comfortable. She even tells her to go spend time with her boyfriend and come back when dinner is ready, but Yunhai insists that she stays back to cook since that is one of the reasons she came to visit. The spirit of Christmas fills the air as the little children play around the big room, trying to fix some decorations on the Christmas tree with their cute hats and dresses. Since everyone is going to make some dinner, Seo-won decides to join in but is immediately stopped, especially by his mother, and he is sent to watch after the kids. Frustrated and bored, he goes to the living room and tries to sit in one of the couches, but the children don't let him be. They use his body for all types of things until he becomes exhausted and falls on the couch to take a rest. Dinner is ready. Auntie instructs them on what to do now that the cookies for the kids have already been baked. All they have to do is decorate them. Yunhai confesses that she doesn't know how to go about it and Auntie tells Dojin to show her how it is done. They both wear the aprons that Auntie offered to them. Yunhai watches Dojin with so much intent as he teaches her how to decorate the cookies, and she gets it on her first attempt. Back in the living room, some of the kids are seen running unsupervised while Seo-won snores like a drunken man on the couch. As they run around, one of the kids falls to the floor and gets a small cut on his face. Seeing this, the little girl who was running after him bursts into tears and starts to explain that she was going after him because he took her hat and didn't want to return it. After a little talk, the little boy who we now know as Jun-woo apologizes and returns Aaron's hat to her. Aaron forgives him and shows concern for the scar on his face, and Chef Yunhai comes to the rescue. She lets Dojin offer some of his help with first aid so the injury doesn't leave a scar on his face. After cleaning up the wound, Yunhai hands Aaron a bandage to place on Jun-woo's wound, and after she does, She tries to blow it so it can heal faster, but when Junwoo sees how close she is getting, he turns away from her. Both adults watch the children and smile at how adorable they are, and as the kids turn to look at them, Aaron asks Yunhai who is she, and because she can say anything, Junwoo replies that she is Dojin's wife. Yunhai smiles at the cuteness, but before she can correct them on her status, Dojin accepts it. He tells the children that Yunhai is his wife. His beautiful wife. Later on, all the kids gather around Yunhai as she helps design their cookies to whatever they want, from their favorite cartoon characters to their favorite superheroes. Each of them politely thanks her for her awesome skills as they shout in excitement. Dojin watches her from afar as he too is occupied with work. He is reading a story to Aaron since she doesn't want to play with the other kids, and decorates some cookies. Still in the business of serving the children, Seo-won is seen coming down the stairs with a tray of food in hand, and from the looks of things, it seems like the child didn't touch their meal one bit. He takes the tray to the kitchen and shows it to his mother. They both show their concern for the child, and Auntie insists that they bring him downstairs to play with the rest of the children if he has the strength, because he has a cold already, but Seo-won tells her that the boy should be in his room until he fully recovers. Yunhai overhears what they are talking about, and she also catches the name of the child. It's Si-woo. A few minutes later, the two brothers step outside to discuss a few personal things. As they keep talking, giving each other updates about their lives, Seo-won pauses to understand what his brother just said to him. He can't believe his ear. Despite all the advice Dojin has given to him about dating, he still makes a crazy decision to let a woman move into his house without even knowing her for a long period. He should have been wiser. There's still a lot to find out in this story, but for now, this is where this segment ends. Drop a comment below if you want part 3. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.